Okay, hello everyone. Beauty Beast and the Beard in with the legendary Robert Applegate. He was the man when it came to colubrids, and he's offered to come and give us a little bit of a chat. If this is the first time you're here, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And let's get started. Mr. Applegate, sorry, I'm hearing myself repeat. Mr. Applegate, nice to meet you. I don't know if I'm sure you don't remember, but back in the 90s, I was in a chat room when the internet was just getting started. And you happened to pop in, and I got to talk to you through the keyboard real quick. And it was an honor. That's the last time I talked to you was about 99 or 2000.
How in the heck can you remember that? I'm
I
having
love
trouble with
Snake.
senility. When a cop stopped me the other day, he asked me why I was speeding. He said, I'm an old man. If I don't get there real quick, I'll forget where I was going.
Well, before the YouTube, that was about the only way that we could reach out to each other, and before that, that was the. I'm sure that I sent a self-addressed stamped envelope to you to check out your price list when Reptiles magazine first came out. I don't remember if you had advertisements there, but if you did, I sent one to you.
Well, if you got on the list, I never charged anybody to get it. I just used to mail out price lists every year for quite some time, but I put all the stamps on them. There was never a send a self-addressed stamped envelope thing. I
Well, that
figured
was
at
very
least I could do is pay for it to get there.
that was very kind of you. So, in case nobody knows, Mr. Applegate is an author. He put out this little book in, I think it was 1992, and it was a great book if you were looking to try to figure out how to get some of these colubrids to breed. I've read this
You,
book probably 10 times in my life.
you got the old one. This is the new one, however it goes,
Ooh.
Ooh, nice.
or
I'm
newer, I
gonna have to
should say.
order one of those.
I'll just
We're
send
going
me
to
your
have
address.
to,
I'll mail you one.
Awesome, awesome.
well, thank you so much. In being in the company of authors, I would like to congratulate my wife. She finished her first novel,
Finally.
and we've got that out on Amazon for it's available, and it's an awesome story. And I don't mind saying that she did a fantastic job.
Thank you, honey.
Well, let's talk about it. What's it about?
Well, you want me to talk?
Hmm.
Okay. So it is a science fiction novel, kind of coming from the heart of an animal and a reptile lover. Basically, this book takes the point of view of Mother Nature, and basically, she takes revenge on mankind for treating her Earth poorly. And so it's really interesting because it's set basically in the modern day with a lot of the problems that we're experiencing and seeing, like viruses and global, climate change and all that stuff. And basically, all these factors come together, and then it escalates really quickly to kind of like this apocalyptic event. But you come to learn through a series of events that basically Mother Nature's seeking revenge on mankind, and you wonder, is man going to prevail? There's a team of scientists that come together, and they're trying to piece all the clues together. And so you have to read the book to know whether or not Mother Nature makes mankind extinct or not.
Oh,
But
you know that didn't happen. I already know the ending because somebody wrote the book, so somebody had to survive.
True, true.
Well,
So
it's fiction, so you never know what's
yeah,
going to happen.
that's true.
I'm just kidding. We'll have to trade books. I'd love
Yeah,
to
that'd
read
be
it.
awesome. I used a lot of my friends as inspirations for specific characters, and I would call them and say, "Hey, there's this kind of quirky kid that I want to use as a character that's like a college student and a musician, and I'm kind of like inspired. That character's sort of inspired by you. So, is that okay with you? Oh yeah, that's awesome." I'm like, just so you know, you die. Like you die in the book. Oh, well, I don't know about that. So I had to call a lot of people up and ask, you're so amazing. Do you think I could, write this character sort of in honor of you? Yeah, yeah. but you die, just so you know, when you read the book, you die. So.
So that means you already wrote it about him before you called him.
Well, I had a plan in mind.
Of course.
So tell us about your book.
Go ahead. The what?
I said, tell us about your book. How did you decide to wake up one day and put all your knowledge into a novel, into a book? How did you do that?
The book that you have, Philippe de Vosgelier, I used to work with him and help him put out the Vivarium magazine way back when, and he just said, "Hey, why don't you write a book?" And he gave me a couple other books that he had written as kind of a model of, you know, what chapters should say and all that kind of stuff. And I was working on an island and had some free time in the evening, so I basically went out and kind of wrote down the chapters, and then I just wrote down everything that I could think of. And I remember when I took it in, it was typewritten, double space typewritten, because I didn't use a computer. And she looked at me and said, "My God, you typed this thing. It must have taken you forever with all the rewrites and everything." And I looked at her and said, "What's a rewrite?" I mean, I basically just wrote it and handed it to her, and they edited it and made me look a little more intelligent from spelling and, you know, grammar errors maybe, but that was pretty much the way it came to fruition. And then later, Bob Ashley wanted to, because I had the rights to it, I patented it, and Bob Ashley wanted to expand it a little bit, and so I wrote the newer book for him, and he's been selling, I guess there's 30,000 copies of it out there somewhere.
Wow, that's amazing. So the photography in that.
Go ahead.
The photography that's in the book, are those all your animals? Did you have to call all your friends? How'd you get all the pictures in the book?
Most of those were mine. A few of them, the editors, you know, added things and put some stuff in. But getting back to where it started, a friend of mine, Chris Madison from England, was fairly famous writer of reptile books and everything, and he was staying at the house with his girlfriend, Xeroxing all my records, which ended up being one of his books. And he basically said, you know, "Bob, you ought to write a book. I'll even co-author it with you if you want." And I asked him, I said, "Well, Chris, how much do you make, you know, on these?" And he said, "Well, you know, about $10,000. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. How long does it take? Well, 6, 8 months. And, you know, you got to do this and you got to change that. And we were sitting back in one of my snake rooms with the walls of snakes and everything. And says, "Well, I only work about that amount of time and I make 40,000 on this wall. So why don't you just write the book and give me credit?" But then he hit my ego. He said, "Wouldn't you like pretty girls to come up and ask for your autograph on something?" He's got a point there. So the book became a book.
So what did you do for your day job, or was snakes just your day job when you were hitting it hard and heavy?
No, I was a fireman. I basically, well, the last part of my career, I was on an island, but pretty much most of my career, I was home every other day. And so I'd worked pretty good for the reptile business to be able to operate it. And then every 2 weeks, I had 3 days in a row off. And so one of them happened to be Friday. So that turned out to be MCRD night. That's mouse, chicken, rat, drunk night, because you got people that would call you and say, "Can I come out and buy 3 mice or 2 rats or 4 baby chicks or something?" And it got to be a pain in the ass. So just every other Friday, we had a party at the house, and everybody that wanted to buy food for their animals and stuff or buy animals would come out that day and party and spend.
Sounds like a good party to me.
Oh, it was.
So what were some of the names at these parties?
Hell, I don't know. I mean, probably nobody you've ever heard of. It's just local collectors and people. Although I've had most of the movie people here at one time or another. I had these little canned snakes in the spring, you know, spring snakes that would pop out. And I had Steve Irwin just about through the screen door when I did that on him. And then we've had Corwin out, and the guy that did the dinosaur thing. I mean, a lot of people come by and they want to film stuff here. Steve Irwin and his crew came out twice, and we planted stuff for him to find. And oh my God, look at this bigger. He just got away, or, whatever. I mean, he was about as hyper off camera as he was on.
Wow.
So I know California is a big place, but do you live anywhere near Gerald Merker?
No, he's in Northern California. That's probably 400 miles from here.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it's probably further than that. But Jerry's been here too, and I've stayed at his house a couple times.
Well, did you know? Go ahead.
He likes to write under a pen name, an artificial name. I can't remember what it is now, but a lot of his magazine articles and everything, it's some made up name that you'd never even figure it would be him. But
oh, wow.
I just can't remember what it is now.
All the books that we have from him actually have his name on it, so I'm not sure what his pen name was.
Well, it's magazine articles. If you see some of the magazine articles about some of the, breeding colubrids and doing some field collecting in Arizona and stuff like that, he wrote under an artificial name.
Oh.
Do you know why he chose to do that?
Well, I think he could submit the articles to several different magazines, sometimes under his name, and a different magazine rewritten a little bit under a different name, and get paid 2 or 3 times for pretty much the same article.
Smart.
That's my guess. He never actually said.
So did you know Barney Tomberlin? He was also a firefighter.
Oh, yeah. I used to sell snakes to him when he was up there at Western Zoological, and that's where I got some of my first beaded lizards. But he was one of the guys that when I imported, I'd go up to L.A. and pick them up and then stop by West Covina or wherever that was he was and sell a bunch of the stuff to them. Jim Brockett and Barney Tomberlin were partners at the time.
Wow. We knew Barney when he was already in Portal, but we lost him a couple years ago now. We still dearly miss him. He was a good guy.
He's a really good guy.
So did you by any chance ever run across Joe Laszlo in the field?
Oh, yeah. In fact, he loves big fat women. I forget how he used to phrase it because he's from some foreign country and he had a hell of an accent. But when I went to the zoo there, he wanted to know how I bred the Argentine boas and took me in the back and showed me all through the place. And then we went over and had dinner at his place. And he's another good guy. He's missed.
Wow. So you've known all the big guys. Philip DeVogely. So you've said you've worked with him. That guy is hard to track down. I hear that he's either got some health problems or someone in his family does. But
he might have. He shows up at the reptile shows here in San Diego. He's gotten big into plants. And he lives up in Escondido, last I heard, which is about, 20 miles north of San Diego.
Oh, wow. I'd like to meet him someday. I got to meet his nephew and his brother. They were at a show in Orlando back in '96, and that's as close as I've ever gotten to him.
Well, I might still have his phone number. If after we go off air, if you want, I'll see if I can find it and give it to you and give him a call and tell him I told you to call.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So my profession is as an educator. So I'm always interested in these people that are these, basically expert keepers and authors and stuff. I want to know about your educational experience. Like, what kind of student were you as a kid? And do you have a formal education in biology? Or I want to know a little bit about that.
I came up through the School of Hard Knocks. I was you'd probably categorize me as one of those kids that needed Ritalin or something to settle down. I can remember in my 2nd or 3rd grade, I was so obnoxious that my teacher made me walk to the class next door, interrupt the class, and ask if I could be in her class. So apparently I wasn't a really good student. Now, supposedly I have a pretty high IQ, and apparently I was kind of bored in school, and that probably contributed to some of it. But no formal education at all. I got a 2-year degree in fire science to help get ahead in the fire department. It took 10 years of part-time because I was still doing the snakes and, of course, working. But never really went to college. I've taught a few classes at some of the college people, but never never actually attended as a student, other than the 2 years fire science stuff. So I'm just a guy off the street.
Wow.
Well, that's truly amazing. I mean, not to say like someone can't be an expert in a field, but what I find is, in my opinion, the most renowned experts are the people that don't have a formal education in biology or herpetology. And, you know, our kids have been raised, you know, up in this industry. And my kids by late elementary, middle school would always be shocked to come home from their new science class and find out that they were more educated in a lot of areas than their science teachers were. And
Yeah,
you know,
but you've got to realize that they didn't teach this stuff. I mean, back when we started, nobody bred snakes. You call the San Diego
right.
Zoo and say you got some eggs. They tell you to put some damn sand in a crock and put a piece of glass on it, and if you're lucky, it'll hatch. I mean, nobody knew. That's seriously. Nobody knew how to do this stuff. And
Right.
I mean, they said snakes couldn't be bred in captivity. So we were thinking, well, maybe it's a tap water. So we go out and we collect rainwater out of puddles and figure there might be minerals or something in it that the snakes needed that wasn't coming from our tap water. I mean, we were doing all kinds of things. And then one group of kids over in Arizona, they just decided, well, you know, well, let me back up a minute, because we knew that you had to keep the snakes warm, because if they ever got chilled, they'd get mouth rot, and then you'd have to be cleaning their mouth out and trying to save them and everything. But the kids over in Arizona said, well, they get cold in the wild, and they basically let a metal building out in their backyard in Tucson get cold for the winter. And that spring, snakes were breeding and producing babies, or, you know, eggs in that particular case. But I mean, well, the Argentine boas, I was credited to be the first one ever, probably, but in the United States to breed them. But I used to have I had a problem with the city of El Cajon. They wouldn't let me convert my garage to a snake room. So I built a snake room inside the garage where the garage door could just barely open and not hit the glass walls of the room. And it was a double layer. And the upper layer was about, the corner cage was maybe 4 foot square, but it had lights mounted on the bottom of it that illuminated the cage down below on the floor. And the Argentine boas were in those cages. And I didn't know it, but they could go up against the glass and be room temperature, which in the winter in El Cajon was down in the 40s and below. Or they could lay up on top of the lights and warm themselves up. So these snakes, I got them as unbreedable. There have been 3 other people that had tried all kinds of things to get them to breed. All of a sudden, I'm producing baby Argentine boas. And it was almost the same kind of an accident with the Durango Mountain Kings. Everybody said, you should write a book because everybody's having trouble breeding these Durango Mountain Kings. And I was breeding them. And my sister happened to be working for a gas and electric company. And right when I started to write the article, I had a bad year where they didn't produce. But we're sitting out drinking beer or whatever and talking about it. And we were talking about our electric bill and the rates. And I said, well, it really wasn't that bad this winter because, the bill wasn't nearly as high as it usually is. She says, well, no wonder. It's one of the warmest winters that we've had in about 20 years. And a little light went on. Hey, the animals didn't get cold enough. It was a warm winter. So I moved them to a room in the northern end of the house where it was a lot cooler and put a little vent through the wall where in the middle of the night I had a timer come on and blow cold air in the room. Back to breeding them. Same with the Arizona Mountain Kings. They went the same way, but not quite as sensitive as the Durangos. But we had to learn trial and error. There was no book you could pick up and read. In fact, A lot of people were complaining about the fact I wrote these books. They said, well, damn it, you've given all the secrets away. You've told everybody how to do this. And now everybody that's got a snake or two, they come back a few years later and they've got 20 of them. They want to give them away. You're ruining the market. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
But it was always a good thing. It's always a good thing because you're really spreading. I think a lot of times people have this very narrow view of what the market is for this stuff. So people always want to protect the information. Like, oh, I don't want anybody to have this secret. But really, even if 1,000 people started breeding the same thing that you're breeding, it's usually there's a bigger market than that.
Well, you can always wholesale them out, but See, a lot of our animals were. I never sold a snake unless somebody knew it ahead of time. It hadn't fed 3 times. We had very detailed records of who the parents were and when they hatched and when they shed skin and even the baby. I mean, you got basically a pedigree with an animal if you bought it from me. And some of them were a little tricky to get on the mice, and there were some secrets that, we used to get them to switch over to mice, because a lot of them are, lizard-eating species in the wild. But it's, there's just the things we had to learn. It's kind of like I noticed in the when I was out collecting, once in a while I would turn a board over or something, and there'd be a nest of mice, and I'd grab the young ones and throw them in the bag and take them home. And here I've got some of these gray-banded kings that I'm sewing lizards to the nose of a mouse or something to get it to eat a mouse along with a lizard. I throw these mice in there, and the snakes chase them down around the cage and they eat them. And I'm thinking, well, crap, there's something different about wild mice than there is tame mice. And then one day I had a mouse, young pup mouse, that fell in the water bowl and drowned. And well, I didn't want to waste it, because that snake, I always tried it on a mouse before I tried the lizard flavoring tricks. And I just set it on top of an abalone shell to let it dry out, because I figured, why waste it? I'll feed it to something else. The snake crawled over and ate it. I thought, the scent washed off of it. And that's when I started taking lizards and putting them in a container and then washing mice and throwing them in that container and rattling them around a little bit and then throwing them in with the snakes. And all of a sudden, flavoring was developed. But it was just pure accident and trial and error.
When we talked before, you talked about the trial and error of chameleons, how they, you guys mistakenly or accidentally found out how to keep them alive, because they wouldn't eat for anyone in the beginning, correct?
Oh no, they would eat. It's just for some reason they didn't thrive. They just didn't seem to do well. And maybe it's because they got nothing but mealworms and crickets, and they didn't know anything about the, putting the vitamins on them or anything like that they do now. Didn't have any of that stuff. But Terry Lilly is the one that told me this story, that he had sold a Jackson's chameleon to a kid, and a couple of months later, the mother and kid come into his backyard. He's out working in the garden or with his animals or something, and he recognizes them as, oh crap, they're going to want their money back or something. And the guy's got a beautiful chameleon sitting on his shoulder, just thriving. And he, well, what have you been feeding it? Well, snails and slugs. And Terry, I guess, looked kind of surprised. And, well, you knew they ate that. Oh, well, yeah, yes, of course. But nobody had any clue that something that shoots its tongue out and grabs things off branches would bend over and crunch up a shelled snail or eat a slug. And so that was a new food source. And apparently there was enough vitamin and mineral in it that it kept the thing alive because it was thriving. But that's how you kind of learn things. And I used to tell people in my lectures that, okay, I'm kind of the person that everybody tells, and I put the information out. But you, pointing to somebody that has 4 or 5 snakes, you have time to observe them. You have time to try different things. I've got hundreds of them. And, I'm kind of an assembly line going. I can miss a lot of things that you'd see because you have the time to spend with an individual animal and, get to know its quirks and possibly its likes and dislikes. But then you come along and you tell me, and 50 of you guys tell me different things, and I kind of put the information together, and wow, I'm the expert, but you're the ones that discovered all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about expert, remember, a drip of water under pressure is a spurt, and an X is you used to be. So expert isn't what it's cracked up to be.
So you have a snake that carries your last name. Can you tell us about the journey to get that snake to market from start to finish?
Are you talking about the gopher snake or the Arizona Mountain King?
Actually, both of them.
2 of them. Well,
both of them.
Okay. Back in about 1985, I was the recipient of a wild-caught gopher snake, albino, or as they say in England, albino, that basically just started bleeding color. It just got brighter and brighter orange as it got older. And I started breeding and producing them, of course. I went out to the area where the guy found it originally and caught some wild females, and because I like to diversify. I don't want to just inbreed like they did with the Sonoran gopher snakes. And anyway, in 1985, they had a big SSAR meeting or something in San Diego. And at the time, they had the Bechtel strain of rat snakes, corn snakes. And they had the Rita strain of something. And people just said, well, now you got the Applegate strain of the gopher snake. And it just kind of stuck. But then later, a friend of mine accidentally produced this special pyro. And he said, well, that Applegate gopher was really popular. Why don't we just call this one the Applegate pyro? And that's where that name came from. So both of them were very successful. There was waiting lists for both of them at fairly high dollar back in the day. Excuse me.
So the pyro was actually birthed. It wasn't something that was caught.
It was caught in the wild. Well, I take that back. I take that back. One friend of mine went over and bought 2 wild-caught Arizona mountain king snakes, and they both were gravid females apparently because they produced eggs. He bred one from one and one from the other and ended up producing that.
Wow.
And apparently one of those has been seen in the wild. It wasn't caught. Apparently it was killed in the destruction of the rocks trying to get it out. But apparently there has been one of those found in the wild, but we managed to get them cleaned up and bred very successfully over the years. Now there's a guy over in Germany that's gone even beyond. He's doing ridiculous things.
Well, the guy that's doing ridiculous things, what kind of stuff is he doing?
Oh, I mean, he's got things that are almost fluorescent. I mean, he's got different pyros groups put together. He's got some of the different gray bands. He's really, every once in a while he'll send out a whatever you call it that you get on the phone that has pictures on it. And he's got some beautiful stuff that he's developed. But he used to come over here and travel around the United States and use our house here as a base.
So what is your monumental animal that you found in the wild? Have you ever found an albino or something weird, or just some animal that is not very common?
As many hundreds and thousands of snakes that I've found, I have never found anything that I would consider super exceptional, and I've never had anything reproduce that was super exceptional that I wasn't expecting from developing what I already had and putting it together to, like the striped albino, Sinaloan, Nelsoni, whatever you want to call them. I mean, we had the striped ones, we had the albino ones, and then of course you breed the albino to the stripe, and you got something like 1 in 32 or 64 chance that there'll be a double recessive, and well, actually you get the hets, you get the double hets. And then you got 1 in 64 of making it. So it took a few years to get them made, but once you got them made, they bred true.
That's awesome.
So what would you say are your favorite places to herp, and where's a place that you'd love to go that you've never gotten to go?
Eventually I want to end up in Australia, but I had a great time in Africa. I had a great time, well, not so great a time in the Amazon. I had a good time in Japan, believe it or not. We snuck into some park, and apparently they're afraid of these things that they're Japanese water moccasins of some kind. But I was wading around in 6-inch deep water, and I'd step on them and then reach down in the muddy water and grab them by the head and American crazy, It was kind of fun. But sadly, the most common animal over there was the American bullfrog. They were over there eating everything in the park ponds.
Oh, wow. I want to know about your not so fun time in the Amazon.
Well, I don't particularly like bugs and humidity. And essentially it's about 95 degrees and probably 100% humidity, and you're walking around the jungle at night with a flashlight or a headlamp or both, and you're wearing a long sleeve shirt to try to keep the mosquitoes off you, and you're covered in DEET. And then I happen to look at my wrist, and I'm thinking, I'm not wearing a watch. And my shirt had slid back a little bit and exposed some parts that didn't have the DEET. Solid mosquitoes. I slapped them, and all of a sudden my arm is bloody. And then we were sleeping in these, I don't know what you want to call them, little cabin things, but they had, I don't know, 3 foot of wood and then screen. And the vampire bats, you'd hear them land on the screen and walk because they're trying to get in to visit with you. And the cockroaches were all over the place. In fact, a couple of them I smuggled back by accident. I opened my suitcase on the pool table to start throwing things in the laundry, and a couple of cockroaches jumped out, and they didn't make it very far. But it was an experience. I mean, the Amazon was amazing. I mean, it's so wide. If you can imagine, I don't know, 2 miles wide. I mean, it's just you can just look out over the water and see a shoreline over there and realize it's a river, and that ocean steamers with all those cargo things, 5 or 10 of them could be side by side, and there'd be plenty of room for them to turn and do everything they need to do. But it was also filthy because every town along the way, from Iquitos all the way down, were dumping crap in there, and sure enough, I got Montezuma's revenge. Just a little drop splashing when the boat's flopping along can do enough to put you in, but it might have been the beer, because I didn't notice it at the time, but there was kind of a yellow scum around the top of the bottle. When you opened the thing and you started drinking, somebody mentioned, "You are wiping the bottles off, aren't you?" And after about 6 of the Peruvian beers, I looked and, oh shit, okay, I'm going to start wiping them off. But I did manage to spend a day and a half in bed over there, kind of puking my guts out and not being real happy. So that wasn't as much fun as the African thing. In fact, the thing that I laughed the most about is there was a couple friends of mine that went with me, or I went with them, or we went together, however you want to look at it. But we were staying at this one place where they warned us that there was a rogue leopard, male leopard, running around, and to be careful where we went. And 2 of them were really focusing on a storm coming up, the lightning coming up the valley and everything. And I snuck up behind him and grabbed him by the ribs, and he dropped his camera and just about shit his pants. I still laugh when I see him and think of that particular episode.
So in Africa, where were you in Africa, and what kinds of reptiles did you get to see there?
Well, we were in South Africa. We went to Johannesburg, where we landed, and then we were staying with a guy that provides the venom for the anavanine over there, and he was our tour guide, and he drove us all over the place. So I think somebody kept track of the animals we saw, and there was, I don't know, 70 some species of reptiles and amphibians we caught or observed there. But we got to visit a lot of the tourist reptile places, and we were out collecting and up in the mountains, and you look out and the baboon is getting out of the jacuzzi that you're about to go into. And you get kind of confused because cobras don't look like cobras until they hood. And we're basically catching things when we're road cruising at night and then photographing them the next day, and then we take them out and release them again close to where we caught them. Well, we picked up this one, what looked like a fresh killed something or another, and the guy said it's some blunt nose something or another, and I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I just thought it's well conditioned, so I'd go ahead and save it and take a picture of it and figure out what it was tomorrow. Well, we put it in the shower stall in a bag, and the next morning I'm out trying to position it, and it just sort of flops and is kind of limp, and I'm putting my hand on its nose and trying to get it to hold still, even though I thought it was dead. And then all of a sudden it hoods, and I'm thinking, shit, that's a cobra. And it turns out it's the kind that killed Cleopatra. So that was an eye-opening experience.
That's amazing.
Why it was so limp and played dead for so long is still a mystery. But I guess certain ones are there, sort of like the hognose snake. I mean, they'll play dead, and you turn them over, and they'll think, well, a dead snake shouldn't be this way, and they turn back over and lay there. But this one, I mean, it was in the bag for probably 12 hours, and then I dumped it out, and it showed no sign of life until I don't know how long I'd been tapping it on the nose and pushing it and trying to position it in position to get a good picture, try to make it look natural. But that was an eye-opener. Now, the python was the fun one, though, because we had a guy that basically you have to get a permit to catch a python in South Africa. And our guy had a python permit because somebody had a giant python that was living near his house, and he was afraid it would eat its kids. And so we were allowed to go look for this snake and take it to a game preserve who had already agreed to take it if we should catch it. Well, we're wandering around the place looking for it, and we're looking in the warthog holes in the area where the guy said it normally is found. And we didn't find it for a while, although we did find some puff adders and a few other things that were sort of fun to catch. And then we were rowing around in a canoe and then realized, wait a minute, they have Nile crocodiles over here. This is probably not a smart thing to do. But all of a sudden somebody yells, the python's out. And so we converge on it. I'm probably 50 to 100 feet away, and one of the guys dives on it, but he got hung up in an acacia bush or something. So instead of landing on the neck, he ended up about a foot or two short. And so the snake started swinging around with its mouth open, but then Schultz, Dave Schultz, I don't know, the guy that does a lot of these movies, he was with us. Superman dove over him and grabbed it, and then I got there just in time to stop it from wrapping around everybody, and it crapped all over me and everybody else. But then Jeff Lim was there, and he was trying to take a picture, and he fell backwards and landed. Well, he had a camera on his back, so he's like a turtle out of water, kicking his feet and his hands. He's laying in this warthog hole. And then he jumps up and yells, run, run. And I'm, why? We've got the python. Well, he landed on a wasp nest. And to see, it's just like the cartoon with the wasp chasing somebody. He runs between everybody, and the wasps are right on his ass, and they chase him probably 100 yards down the road. And they didn't bother anybody but him. So that was a fun one. And then the snake was 17 feet long, and we took it probably 100 miles to this game reserve. And then our guide got a call, said, you took the small one, the big one's still here. So
So was that python Seabay, the African rock?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They're not very nice.
I think the one at one time, I think they've decided there's a different subspecies with smaller scales or something, and this might have turned out to be one of those. I don't really remember now. This is back in, I don't know, 85, or maybe it was 2005 or something. The years go by awful quick anymore.
Well, so you're at the forefront with, so did you know Dr. Bechtel?
I met him a couple of times. Yeah. We went up to Canada to see his place. Or no, I'm sorry. Bechtel was the albino guy. Glenn Slimmer, I guess, was the doctor up in Canada that had so many generations of corn snakes. He said he bred 7 different generations, brother, sister, and couldn't figure out why all of his corn snakes would eat once or twice, regurgitate, and die. But he had them so inbred that apparently acquired a death gene or something.
Well, my question is while you guys are all trying to figure out how to breed them, and then all of a sudden these morphs come out, what was the process for you learning, like the albino Applegate gopher? That snake, when you bred it, were you pretty confident that you were going to produce albinos, or did you think?
Well, there was already other animals that had albinism in them and different color patterns and everything. And at the time, we didn't know all this double negative and this and that kind of stuff that they're coming up with now. I mean, the idea that, in fact, even the San Diego Zoo and not Glenn Slimmer, Ernie Wagner, he got 2 albino wild-caught king snakes from San Diego area from the zoo because he was friends with the curator. And then he bred them and had advertised that he was going to be selling albinos, and they all came out normal. It turned out that there was 2 different types of albino. So now he had double hets for both kinds of albino, but that's how we found out that it's, excuse me, that's how we found out that it's not just that simple. But for the most part, if you see something and it turns out to be genetic, later we found out that sometimes if you incubate too warm, you can get striping and some of the different things will happen to the patterns, but it won't be genetic that you can't breed for. But most of the time, if you get something that you think is genetic, it turns out to be fairly easy to reproduce.
Oh, that's amazing. So did you ever run across anything in California that had a codom gene?
Not that I'm well. Those king snakes I was just telling you about. I guess that would be considered co-dominant because you could breed for either type of albino. See, I've never really gotten into that educated part that she was alluding to earlier. Essentially, if I liked something, I wanted to make more, and you could call it whatever you wanted. I didn't worry too much about all this terminology.
Well, so
That's back
you
when I wrote my book, they were trying to make me use bigger words and all this kind of stuff. They said, it sounds like you're just sitting there having a conversation with somebody. I said, exactly. Well, we need it to be a little more professional. I said, then get somebody else to write the damn thing. This is the way I talk, and this is the way it's going to be if I'm writing it. And you can correct the spelling and stuff, but you're not changing the grammar, and you're not adding things to make me look more intelligent than I am, or less intelligent in some cases. Because a lot of the people that seem to really know what they're doing, turns out they don't.
Yeah, we run across that a lot. So I assume that you've had a chance to herp West Texas. Have you ever caught an alterna in the wild?
12 of them.
Wow. And what's your favorite
That's
part of West?
12 trips. Well, actually, I take that back. Well, we did go 12 times, but it took a while before we caught our first one. But on 7/7, 7/9, and 7/12 of 77, at 9:45, 10:15, and 12:15, we caught our first 3 alterna. And those stick in your minds, as you can maybe tell by the fact I can memorize those dates, but I couldn't remember the name of some people that have stayed here for a year.
Priorities.
Exactly.
Some things are more important than others.
So where'd you catch them?
On Highway 90, place about 15 to 20 miles west of Langtree.
Oh, wow.
Right on the highway. But see, it takes a while to learn how to catch those things because they don't shine like other things do. I mean, I had a van with aircraft landing lights on the front, and in our area out in the desert, I can be doing 50 miles an hour and spot a blind snake far enough ahead that I can hit the brakes and stop and catch it. But those don't reflect there. Basically, the best way to catch them is you get a pillow and somebody with a spotlight, and you have them hang out the door on, the window on the passenger side and spotlight down and pick them up. Because, well, one time I had Gary Sipperly with me, and we opened the sunroof, and he's standing up on the console with a spotlight, and we see this snake crawling in front of us, and he's, "Snake, stop!" But I looked up at him and looked back, and the snake was gone. I mean, it blended in. It was right in front of us with 200 watts of aircraft landing light shining on it. And until it moved, you couldn't see it. And then it moved again, and oh, there it is, And so it's kind of like the rosy boa and the lyre snake out here. They have small enough scales or something that they don't shine like Atrox or, Western Diamondback or gopher snake or, Trans-Pecos rat snake or something. I mean, you see them far enough ahead, you have to speed up to get up to them. But the Blair's Alterna group they just don't shine.
Still haven't seen one on the road. We've caught 6 so far in the last 2 years after almost 25 years of hunting. So we're feeling pretty lucky.
You doing the bank spotting or the crevices?
We're hunting the cuts. We do a little bit of road hunting, but the last couple of years it's been so dry here, nothing's really moving on the roads.
Yeah, we got lucky a couple times and got there right after rain, so that helped a lot. And then we'd walk the canyons and catch those little rattlesnakes, the lepidus. And one time we saw this great big ledge up over top of the creek bed or whatever you want to call it. And, I'll bet there hadn't been anybody up there in 100 years since the Indians. So we climbed all the way up there, and we ended up with an archaeological site with all kinds of little sectors mapped out with ropes and everything. And now it's some kind of park. But back then, it's just, I thought we were going to step into some virgin. The last person up here looking out over there was probably an Indian. And yet there's beer bottles all over the place. And it was obviously some college's archaeological dig.
That's amazing. So did you know Earl Turner?
I actually had some experiences with him on the road, not necessarily great. He used to have his little But he used to have his little minions that they would space themselves out about a quarter mile and drive along, and reputation had it that they'd run you off the road if you tried to intersect their group or anything. But I always carried either a 45 or a 357 and made it a point to let him see me target practicing at Via de la Mina, where we used to stay, and they never bothered me.
So yeah, you did know Earl Turner.
I knew Earl Turner and some of the stories of how he ripped different people off and all this kind of stuff. I hope there's no stories like that about me out there. I don't think I've ripped anybody off. Scared a few people maybe, but.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh gosh, I don't know where to go from here.
I do.
Is there? Okay, let's hear it.
I want to hear some of the fun stories. I mean, Bob, you have like a bunch of great times, like picking up animals from the airport. Why don't you just start talking about a couple of the animals from the airport stories? And
well, the one that sticks in mind was I was smuggling some alligators into California along with tortoises and turtles and water snakes and water moccasins, and a guy named Ray Singleton that used to be a famous reptile dealer down in Florida until he got thrown in jail for stealing bicycles. Sent me these things. And I had never handled a large, well, I say large, 3-foot alligator before. But in the old days, you could drive right up to the airplane and unload. And so we're around the back where the plane's parked and the passengers have departed, and we're unloading the freight. And I'm opening all the different boxes and everything to make sure things are alive, because if you have a complaint, you got to do it right there. Well, I opened the box with the alligators, and they were protected at the time. Or hypothetically, this person was opening this box with alligators in it.
Yes.
And they had their mouths taped shut. And I thought, well, that's kind of cruel. They seem to be just laying there fairly complacently. So I thought I'd just untape the mouth and throw them in the back of the van, because I didn't want to put them back in their box. And I'd gotten to about 3 or 4 of them out of 6. And all of a sudden, it was like somebody blew a whistle, and they came to life, started snapping around, jumping out of the van, running under the airplane, all over the place. I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to get these alligators back in the truck without anybody seeing that I've smuggled in endangered species? And then when you touch them, they go head to tail with their mouth open. And I, well, shit, I wasn't expecting that either. But we managed to get them in. And I had some kids with me, because they always liked to hang out with me, because apparently it was fun. And so the back of the van was just metal floor. And driving home, we saw this cowboy-looking dude hitchhiking along the road. I thought, oh, what the hell, we'll pick him up. So we picked him up, and the alligators had been walking all over the place until we picked him up, and they, for some reason, stayed in the back. And so we're kind of goading him a little bit about he's going to some rodeo. And, well, have you ever had any experience with alligators? Oh, yeah, we used to wrestle them. We used to do this and that. And he was telling all kinds of stories, but we got to the place where he wanted out, and this damn thing still hadn't come forward. So I kept going kind of fast and then hit the brakes fairly hard, and they slid up by his feet. Well, he opened the door, and there was a bank there. He just, last we saw him was ass over tea kettle rolling down the bank, because he left the van before it stopped. And I hope he wasn't hurt, but we were laughing so hard we just closed the door and kept going. He might still be laying there for all I know.
Oh my gosh.
But that was a funny one. Then when we used to bring things in from Africa, I never particularly wanted to keep a cobra, but I had people that wanted to buy them. So we'd open the bags or open the boxes and lay the bags out, and they'd be labeled, and you'd poke it and it'd move. And okay, that's your black neck spitting cobra, or whatever. And I never even bothered to open them, but we had I don't know, just lots of things, lots of fun. But it was fun when you drove to Los Angeles and you found that your shipment had been exposed to cold and everything was dead or sick. That's kind of when I decided to stop importing it. Just, I mean, you'd be making money on 3 or 4 shipments, and then all of a sudden you'd get a bad one and you'd be burying piles of snakes. And so I did just, it's kind of in the 70s when I kind of converted to breeding rather than importing and collecting. And I feel really good because I probably produced more snakes than I caught. So if you want to look at the payback replenishing type thing, I probably saved more wild snakes, assuming that the people that bought the snakes from me would have gotten a wild one if they didn't buy it from me. So I paid my dues.
That's
It's a
amazing.
good way to think of it.
So, were you ever fortunate enough to allegedly breed Heloderma?
Oh yeah,
Oh.
yeah. In fact, San Diego Zoo got credit for being the first, but they just confiscated a bunch of them and they laid eggs and they managed to hatch them. I actually got them and the beaded lizards to breed. And, as far as I know, I was the first in the United States to do that.
So, what did you use for egg laying boxes for the Gilas and the beadeds?
I just had a big version of my drawer type cages, and they would just go down into the drawers where I'd have full of moss and stuff. Or in the early days, sometimes if I was pretty sure one was going to lay, I'd put it in a 10-gallon aquarium filled with sphagnum moss, and it would dig down and lay the eggs, and then go from there. But
So, what was your incubation technique?
the same as the snakes. I would basically take the eggs. Well, okay. I'd have an incubator that I'd set at 80 degrees. And then I had shelves on the incubator that I had plastic boxes, not styrofoam, whatever you call those clear plastic boxes with holes drilled in the side. And I'd put about a half to an inch of water in it. And then I'd take almost dry vermiculite and put them in little plastic containers and literally float them in this, and then just set the eggs on top just with slight indentation so they didn't roll. And that way, every time I opened the door to the incubator, I was changing the air. And also there was the heater was on the bottom, and the bottom floor sloped from low in the front to a little higher in the back with two 4-inch tubes that were the only places where the hot air could go up. And so the air would go up through these tubes and then gently roll forward and come down. So I didn't have to worry about a heat inversion of, it's hot at the bottom and cold at the top and all that kind of stuff. So that worked out really well for the colubrids and the beadeds and Gilas, because the eggs were dry to the touch. You didn't have a big humidity problem, but there was constant water evaporating around them. So they were humid enough that they didn't dry up. And it just was a very, very functional technique. And we'd have 700 or 800 eggs in the incubator at any one time.
Wow. So, was it a fridge or what? Something you
No, I
had built?
built out of a wooden box, just out of plywood. But then I put the 2-inch thick styrofoam with the silver backings that they use for insulation. I made a shell around the outside when I had it in a room that got cold before I wanted it to get cold, just to
Wow.
help the heat stay in.
So your vermiculite did not have any, you didn't add any moisture to it.
No, just a little bit. I mean, it'd be like if you took a rag that was slightly moist and put it against your face. That's about all the moisture. There's none of this 1-to-1 by weight or anything. You just poured a little bit of water in there and it was fine. Because as long as the water was evaporating all around them, I honestly believe I could have had perfectly dry vermiculite and they still hatch.
Well,
People
that's
make it
awesome.
people make it too technical. I mean, you figure snakes are under a rock someplace in all sorts of environments and all sorts of things, and their eggs hatch. So why make it so complicated? Just figure out what's happening in the wild. They've got good ventilation, they've got reasonable temperature, and they don't dry up. And if you get those 3 things covered, you're good.
That's what I say. He freaks out if the incubator changes by 1 degree, and I tell him things hatch in the wild. So there you go.
There you go.
Above the green.
See, she's an expert. She's an
I knew
expert.
it all
See?
along. Yeah.
Well, I'm a
That's
moron, and if there's any way to screw it up, I'm going to screw it up.
Well, you got to get fertile eggs, and that's when we started checking for sperm. In fact, it was kind of weird because trying to check for sperm on a Gila monster beaded lizard is kind of tricky, and I can't remember which one now, but the sperm on them, instead of being the normal serpentine swimming things, they look like little commas that sort of jerk as they go along. It was really surprising to see that. At first, I thought they were parasites. I was like, well, what the hell are these things? But I used to just one of the reasons I used to use the silica sand in the cages was because when the snakes would breed and they'd pull out, there'd be a little drop of semen that you could see because it'd make a little plug in the sand. So if you knew the snakes were breeding or had been breeding recently, You just squeeze a little fluid out of the female and look at it under a 200 power microscope with a shaded screen. You see the sperm swimming all over the place. If you don't, then you better throw another male in because she'll be receptive for quite a while. And then if you happen to see trichomonas or Gerardia or Strongyloides worms or whatever, which, you know, where they come from in captive animals, presumably they come in with the mice, or I don't know, maybe those little jumping flies, you know, if you get dad eggs, I don't know where they come from, but sometimes animals that should be perfectly clean end up having Gerardia or trichomonas or whatever, but they're fairly easy to kill with just a little flagell.
Wow. So would you do that on gravid females if you saw it?
Well, I mean, when they're breeding, the eggs are really just follicles. I mean, sure, you can run the thing over your thumb and you can maybe feel the little bumps in some of them and all that stuff. But once they're gravid and they're, you know, starting to swell up and get ready for their pre-egg laying shed and everything, there'd be no point in looking for sperm because they're already fertilized and developed. That was just a help at the beginning of the year to make sure you got fertilized eggs, because some males, okay, and again, the Argentines kind of taught me this, but some males in the wild, you know, they go down under a rock and they maybe get down 50, 60 degrees or whatever. We throw them in a cage that has heat. Well, they like to lay on the heat, but, you know, in the wild, it wouldn't be available to them, but in captivity it is. And I honestly believe that some of them sterilize themselves by getting too warm. And so you try, if you're breeding a bunch of snakes and you want to have certain males that, you know, do the breeding, put them in the cages down on the floor with very little or no heat, and then just throw them up in the cages with the female for breeding, and you have better success than if they're where they can be warm all the time. Now, some snakes, they breed well anyway, but if you're starting to have trouble, you go through the process of elimination. What in the wild is happening that I'm not doing here? And start eliminating the easiest ones first until you get up to, you know, whatever you can think of.
It's amazing. So give us some more stories.
You can't just manufacture them. You got to remind me of something.
Well, tell us about one of your heroes and tell us a story about them.
Well, actually, my boyhood hero, if you want to call it that, was he's a hero, all right, and I can't even remember his name. The guy at the New York Zoo, Ditmars, because I grew up reading his books. I never got to meet the man, but his Thrills of a Naturalist's Quest has a chapter in it where he converted his parents' attic to a snake room, and that was the beginning of my dream that someday I'm going to have a snake room. And he was more of a technical writer. He didn't write too many adventure type stories, although his Thrills of a something adventure is his only fiction book. But the reason it's fiction is because he basically just composited all the different stories of some of his collecting and everything and wrote it as if he was, you know, being on a journey on a big ship and traveling around the world doing all this collecting. But then another one would be Ray Caulfield. What the hell is his name?
Carl Caulfield?
Carl, yeah, Snakes and Snake Hunting. Now, I didn't get to meet him. I was taken to be introduced to him and got to run around the Staten Island Zoo like a VIP, but he was sick that day because Charles Shaw had just died and they were good friends, and he wasn't in the zoo that day. Otherwise, I would have gotten to talk to him. But I've had Roger Connon out at the house and took him to lunch, and the other guy that wrote the big snake, giant snake, Clifford Pope, he used to live up here in Escondido, and he never made it to the house, but I was visiting him at his place a couple times. And I mean, a lot of the greats are gone.
Did you ever get to meet Clobber? He was there in
I talked to him on the phone several times. Yeah, he basically had rattlesnakes in his basement down in San Diego that would be totally illegal today. But I've talked to him on the phone a few times. We never actually got to meet. He kept saying he had heard of me and wanted to come out, and never did, though.
Well, my hero is Joe Laszlo. I wish I could have met him before he passed.
Oh, he was amazing. Fun. He was fun. He just, I mean, he was very, very fat, and he loved to eat. And he just, anytime you saw him, he was chewing on something, but he just would tell you stories, and he'd have that, I want to say Polish, but it's some country over there, Czechoslovakia or
Wasn't he
someplace.
Hungarian?
That's it.
He was
That's it.
Hungarian.
Well, see, that fits him. So he was hungry, and he's really fat. But no, he was a good guy. I enjoyed our visits there.
So, did you ever get to actually go out with him and do any herping, or was it
No,
all
I
just
don't
at the
think
zoo?
I don't think we did. It was all at the zoo, or he came to a party that we had when I was doing a slide presentation at Tom Vermersch's place. He came there, but just you know, I might have run into him on the road when we were collecting and he was collecting, but I never actually went with him anywhere to collect anyway.
You said you had Steve Irwin over. You hung out with him. You want to tell that story?
Well, they were here twice, filming stuff. One time they came over and were doing the Rattlesnakes of America stuff, and we had a few snakes that we had set aside to help them, and then we went out to the desert with them and took the Sidewinder out, and I told him not to try to tail a Sidewinder because they're really quick. Oh, I've been doing this and he picked up this about 18-inch Sidewinder by the tail, and it should have bit him. It just went right by his thumb. But oh, they're quick, you know. Yeah, that's what we're trying to tell you. You know? But he was very enthusiastic and was as hyper off camera as he was on, and he was fun to be around.
Well, I didn't know it, but he actually wrote an article in Reptiles magazine until after he passed, where I was going through all my collection, and he did a really nice article on the perennial monitors. So, you know, I believe he actually had a degree in zoology, didn't he? And
I don't really know his background as far as education. To be honest with you, I never really worried too much about education. If I liked to hang out with somebody, I could learn from them, they could learn from me, and it was a mutual exchange, and that's what made it fun. So again, remember back at the beginning, none of this stuff was taught. It was all pretty much self-learned. Now you could maybe take a course in it or something somewhere, but back then, none of this stuff was even dreamed of, because snakes, well, reptiles in general, were impossible to breed in captivity. You just can't duplicate the conditions. That was pretty much the dogma of, well, even the San Diego Zoo. Now they had lifetime, you know, keeping them alive longer than anybody else, because we have great weather here, and they had skylights that they'd open in the good weather, and they'd have the natural sun and the natural air and everything. And so they were getting animals that were living way longer than anybody else, until they put the sky cart, whatever those things are, sky ferry thing in. And one of the docents said, that building looks terrible with all those windows and everything. So they sealed them all up, and that kind of ended their longevity run.
That's too bad. So I hear that they had a pretty good collection of Fiji Island iguanas. Were you involved with any of the cavorting of them getting imported into the U.S.?
No, I didn't have anything to do with them. Really. I had a chance, but they were pretty well regulated at the time, and there was already, you know, Tom Crutchfield had already done some behind the scenes dealings to get the surplus because I mean, the San Diego Zoo, well, probably other zoos too, but the curators at the reptile house, I mean, if they wanted a garter snake to feed a cobra, they had to submit a requisition and get an approval to buy. But if they surplus their animals to an approved dealer, then they had a credit and they could spend it any way they wanted. And Tom would pay their way to different herp conferences, or you know, they could order anything they wanted without having to go through the technicalities. So he ended up getting a whole lot of stuff. Besides, he did a lot of smuggling and everything, but he got a lot of stuff. And the guys in Arizona were bringing in a lot of stuff from Australia until one of the boxes started croaking, and there was a little crocodile in there, and they got caught doing that. But they were being mailed Christmas gifts in July.
Well, that's really cool. Did you know Hank Molt?
Oh yeah. Yeah. In fact, one of the dreams from Ditmars was the Bushmaster. And I've always read the story about the Bushmaster and always wanted to see him. Well, I think it was 436 Jenkintown Avenue or something was where Hank lived. And I went to his house and he said, well, I've got an 8-footer that's tame. And so we went down into his basement and it was like a metal locker with an open door. We opened the door and he started pulling this snake out. And I remember watching it go through my hands, but I was so intent on watching that door in case it came back out and everything. I forget what it felt like. It was just one of those, I know I touched it, but I was so worried about, you know, the 2-inch fangs and the this and that, I never really appreciated the value of that particular episode.
Wow.
Well, we recently, an old friend of ours, he had one, and he said that they've got some kind of an infrared sensor that you can actually watch them, and when they go into infrared, that's when you don't mess with them. And he said you don't pull them out at night; they're like a completely different animal between day and night.
Well, that's like Gila monsters. You put those guys. I mean, I had Gila monsters that I used to take to classes and let people pose with. And one day I took it out in the backyard to let somebody photograph it, and it was out in the sun, not overheated or anything, but just out in the sun for about 10 minutes. I went to pick it up, it almost bit me. You haven't tried to bite anybody for 20 years. What the hell are you doing? So it turns out that something in the natural light turns them on too.
That's amazing. So you at the time you were bringing stuff in from Africa, and you worked with some exotic stuff. You're talking about the boas you had bred. Was there any other tropical or foreign species that you were able to breed?
Well, we did the Burmese pythons, and I won't take credit for breeding the Candoya, the Solomon Island boas, but they'd mail me 2, and they'd be 100 of them show up because they have millions of little babies. And I mean, I was giving those things away to people saying, I'll give this to you, but you find something that'll eat besides lizards. Get it to eat mice or something, because I'd have 200 of them at one time and couldn't get them to eat any pinkies or anything. And there's only so many lizards you can catch. Now, the adults would eat mice, but trying to get the babies to eat. I mean, we tried frog scenting, lizard scenting, split braining, washing the pinkies, all kinds of stuff. And once in a while we'd get some to eat, but I don't know what they ate in the wild, but they sure didn't convert very easy. But mostly the exotic stuff was a collection. It was back where you got 2 or 3 of these and 2 or 3 of those, and you weren't really concerned about breeding. You were just keeping them because that's what you did back then. Again, breeding was impossible. And plus, there was no real reason to. I mean, honestly, you could take a snake and put it in a cage at the zoo, and you could let it starve to death and then replace it cheaper than to feed it for that period of time it took for it to die. I mean, they were just disposable. And nobody would spend money to go to a vet or do anything. I mean, if it was sick, you just lopped its head off and got another one. But when the laws started passing and things started getting harder to get, and suddenly a breeder snake could make you thousands of dollars, and then it's worth it to take it to the vet. But then the vets didn't really know what was going on.
Right.
And so half the time you take it to the vet and it might survive whatever it was and live, but it wouldn't breed again. It was just whatever was done. But I used to even take my snakes out and exercise them because I figured, you know, they get fat and lazy. You get some of these animals that in the wild, you catch them fresh caught and they'll have 6 or 7 eggs. After a couple of years in captivity, they have 12 eggs, but the last couple don't come out. Well, gee, they're not hunting for a living. They're just laying there and they burp and you feed them another fat mouse. And so some of the more valuable ones I used to take out and let the kids play and run them around the yard and everything to give them exercise, just to try to stimulate a little more muscle development. And again,
never thought about
trial and error.
So do you know anybody these days that's working with Candoya in any numbers? That's a dream animal of mine.
Not that I'm aware of. Again, I don't know what happened to the hundreds I had. I mean, they were $5 and $6 Australian each when I was bringing them in from the Solomons. And in fact, the skinks were $6 Australian, which was about $9 at the time, US. And he'd put them in bags that were marked what sex they were, but I couldn't tell the difference. He'd always try to tell me. And then, well, you've heard of the first woman found in Africa, the skeleton what do they call it, Lucy or something like that. Well, Leakey was the professor that found it. Well, his son was a reptile exporter, and I used to get his box 111 Nakuru, Kenya, East Africa was his address at the time, and I used to buy all kinds of stuff from him, and he'd send me over these black tree snakes that he'd call black tree snakes, but one of them laid eggs, and they come out and they look just like not mama's. What are those rear fang ones that boom slangs? They look like boom slangs. So I took them down to the zoo, and they said, well, they're boom slangs. I said, well, wait a minute. This guy is an expert, and he says that this is Thrasop's jacksoni, the black tree snake. And so I went to the library, and I got the keys out, and sure enough, they're the black tree snake. Then I found out the guy that made the key got bit by one he misidentified, and it killed him. So I'm still not positive whether I was selling baby boom slangs to pet shops as black tree snakes. But nobody I know actually got bit.
Wow.
That's amazing. So the app, what's the process when you decide you want to start importing from Africa? How do you get a phone number, and how do you develop a level of trust to send money over there so they send snakes to you?
Well, back in those days, people were apparently more trustworthy. Like the guy in the Solomon Islands, he would send me stuff, and dumb me, I didn't realize that they had different money. I would write him out a check and mail it to him, and somehow he got it cashed from American dollars into whatever their currency was. And I used to do the same thing with Leakey, and the same thing with Maharaj Lakshaya in Thailand, and the guy in India. And I mean, people would trust me, and I never let them down. But as far as getting the information from them or how to find them, essentially what I would do is I'd write letters to universities in those countries saying I'm a reptile collector and I'd be interested in trading or buying some. Do you have anybody in your class, biology classes or whatever, that would fit this bill? And oh no, but I know this guy, or whatever. And I just get introduced to people like that. I just hunt them down.
Have you ever worked with Boland's pythons?
No, I never have.
What would you say was one of your more frightening experiences abroad?
Frightening?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, probably when I was in Mexico, and we were stopped under a machine gun, armed, plainclothes people that turned out to be looking for somebody else, fortunately. But I was in Mexico City when the professor's van, or whatever you want to call it, was found in possession of the police chief, and he claims he just found it along the road and was using it until they found who it owned, but he was never saw again. Just stuff like that. Mexico scares me because you're carrying a lifetime income for a lot of those people, and if you get away from the border 100 miles or so, there's really good, honest, decent people down there, but getting away from that border is tricky. I mean, we had a deal down in Texas where we were hunting the Black Gap, and the road goes to a sometimes open, sometimes closed port of entry in Mexico. And we were driving along slow, and that of course was very suspicious because we might be picking up Mexicans and everything, and we were in a park. So the Border Patrol stopped us and basically checked us out, and we told him what we were doing. He said, I don't care, take all the snakes you want. But then later, when he stopped us, he's flashing his lights kind of violently. And so I get kind of pissed off, and I just pull over to the side on a curve where, I figured I was going to go to a safe spot and pull over. Well, I jump out getting ready to chew his ass out, and I hear a round going into a 12-gauge shotgun. Yes, sir. Okay. What do you want? I mean, the whole tone of the meeting changed at that moment. But he told me that there was apparently a guy that had gotten his van or a camper confiscated in Mexico, and he had gone back down there to try to steal it, but they caught him and were chasing him, and they were shooting at him as he was swimming across the river, and he broke into the Border Patrol station, which was closed, and they were going down to arrest him. And so they didn't want me to go there at that time, is why he was so trying to stop me before we got to that point. Well, so we just turned around and was hunting in the other direction. And then one Border Patrol guy flies by, presumably heading up to Alpine with a prisoner. And then that same guy stopped us again. He says, I just got a call that there's some smugglers about ready to bring a load across, and my partner just took the prisoner up to this town 80 miles away. Would you guys be my backup? So he hands me this machine gun, and we're sitting on the road telling stories, waiting to see if I get to shoot somebody. But they never showed up. But he told us some really interesting stories. Like one of the Mexicans came up and was getting tired of being searched or anything, so he had a leather pouch sewed into his clothes, and he had a rattlesnake in it, so that when the agent was going to put his hand in there to see what he had, he'd get bit and all that kind of stuff. So we had a couple of, because we weren't finding any snakes that night, so getting to listen to this guy and his border apprehension stories was well worth the sitting there. But other than seeing a flare off in the distance, nobody ever showed up. So, damn.
Well, being in Mexico, what kind of animals were you collecting down there? What animals did you see?
Well, we went down and, we went down to Mazatlan and caught my first and 10th and 11th boa constrictor, and we're finding the big green tree frogs. And we had a situation where we had paid a guy to take us off the tourist route to snag iguanas with the snares up in the trees. And we come around a corner, because this was at a resort, but we wanted him to take us away from the resort thing because they didn't want us to catch the iguanas the tourists were looking at. And we come around a corner, and there's little baby crocodiles very close to the shore. And I'm thinking I can get $100 each for those things. So I had them dump me off on the shore close to it, and I had this butterfly net, and I walked over to the shore. Well, they're starting to swim out and starting to go under, and I thought, well, I'll just step in the creek and snag them. Well, I had no idea that this creek didn't have a bottom. It was just one of those cutaway things. All of a sudden, I'm underneath murky water, and I have this thought of, mama crocodiles protect their babies, don't they? And it was, the guy said I almost water walked. He said I popped out and somehow landed on the shore, all in one motion. Never did get any crocodiles. But
those were morlets, I assume?
I guess they're American crocodiles down there. I'm not really sure. I was told they were American. Because Mazatlan is only about 1,000 miles down, or not even that far, I don't think. But I went down there and we were catching Pueblan milk snakes, and we caught some of the little rock rattlesnakes. Caught a couple annulata. Nothing real special. I mean, it's the kind of thing that catching your first boa constrictor is a thrill just because you've had hundreds of them, but you caught one, even though the Mexican boas are nastier than hell and not nearly as attractive as the red tails. But just getting out and seeing different things, those little blunt-headed tree snakes, the snail-eating things, and just different animals. I don't know. Everything's kind of blending together because I've gone so many times to so many places that sometimes I couldn't tell you which trip I was on when this particular thing happened. But it happened, hypothetically.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So have you ever seen a San Francisco garter snake in the wild?
I have not, but I live way south of anywhere near where they'd normally be found, and other than a occasional walk around a hill like Jerry's place up there, I've never really hunted the cold mountain areas up there.
Well, neither have I, and I was born in Napa, so that's kind of a bummer.
Well, I mean, everybody comes south to catch the good stuff,
Oh yeah, that's what I did.
So, go ahead, sir.
No, I was just going to acknowledge her thought.
What's your feelings on the population of Ruber in California? Are they declining, do you think, or you think they're holding their own? Well,
they're declining because people are filling in the spaces that they live. I mean, we now maybe people are leaving California, and maybe there won't be this gradual expanding of everything. But when I was commercially collecting, most of the places that I used to go, and once a week I would catch everything there was, but we'd have boards out near the mountains and everything. And for 15 years, I could go and pretty much catch the same amount of stuff because we were just catching a little narrow strip, and everything around us was still more or less wild, and the populations were intact. But now they're parking garages and shopping centers and housing tracts, and you'll probably never see another snake. But there's enough open country here in California that if you fly over it, you're amazed at how many places don't have anything. So I'm sure there's still plenty of rubers out there, but obviously there's less because wherever people are, the ruber aren't anymore.
So they're not a snake that can integrate into living in areas that are populated?
They don't seem to be. Now, the Southern Pacific, you can find them in people's backyards. In fact, even out here in Campo, we have 3 different rattlesnakes that live here on the property, but most of the calls that I get from the neighbors of, hey, please come get this snake, because they'll call the fire department, and if it's out in the open, the fire department will come kill it. But if it goes under the house or anything else, it's, let's call Bob. He'll go under there and get it. We're not going under there. So, and most of them are Southern Pacifics. But I usually just take them out in a more remote area and let them go. Or I've got one friend of mine that does the dog training with the shock collars. And if it's really a good size, nasty one, I'll let him use it for a while. But he promises to take it out and let it go once it mellows out and calms down again.
Well, we have here in our town, we've got Western Diamondbacks that are actually on the hospital grounds. They don't seem to mind humans at all, and they seem to do pretty okay in communal developments.
I thought you were on the East Coast. Where is here?
We're about 60 miles south of Odessa.
Oh, you're in Texas then?
Yeah.
Yes.
We moved to Texas.
Okay, for some reason I thought you were Pennsylvania or East Coast or something.
No way.
No,
You're in the East Coast.
Yeah.
Ben, you're in the East Coast, right?
Yeah, I'm in the East Coast.
Okay.
All the way in New Jersey.
Oh, I was born in Jersey. I actually got to catch a pine snake and a corn snake and some hognose snakes in the Barrens.
Yeah.
Back in 1970 when I was making the cruise around the United States with my family snake hunting.
We go into the Pine Barrens often. We're really close to the Pine Barrens, but I'll be honest, most times when I go out, I don't find anything. We do find stuff once in a while, but it's
Did you ever, I think I gave you the phone number of Dave Humes and you were going to look him up. Did you ever have any luck finding him?
I didn't. We couldn't get a hold of him. We tried, but I couldn't find him.
Yeah, because he was my guide there, and he knew all the old pig ranches and where the boards were and all this kind of stuff. But he just basically took us from spot to spot, and we found stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of development that's been going on, and people will say you'll find all different sorts of stuff, but a lot of times you'll find things in places where they're developing or putting in new developments. They're like, yeah, we saw construction workers. Oh, we saw a bunch of snakes run out of here and all this stuff and skinks and things, and but then they're nowhere to be found anywhere in that area.
Well, it's kind of out here. When they put a new development in, it seemed like all their neighbors start finding baby rattlesnakes, and they say, "Oh, geez, there's an influx of baby rattlesnakes." And I like to point out that, the parents are around here somewhere, and they usually only have 6, 7, 8 babies at a time for this particular type. The big ones are here too. Keep your eyes open, But the big ones don't get big by being out in the open and getting, caught too often.
Right.
They're a little more elusive. Although back in the flume, which is a 7.5 mile cement ditch that I took Steve Irwin out to do his little rescue the rattlesnake out of the floating down the water thing. A lot of times that's dry, and we walk through the tunnels where the bats are, and sometimes the rattlesnakes will be going in to eat the bats. And there's been times that I found reds that they're quite common in that area. Reds and speckles are the most 2 common there. And there's been some that I'm pretty sure I could pick up and probably not worry about getting bit. They never rattle, even in a pillowcase being carried for miles. And other times you'll be walking along and you'll hear one that maybe it was out in the open and whipped into the bush, but you didn't see it, but you hear it rattling, and you go over the bush and there it is. So you got 2 different personalities of, basically the same snake. But for the most part, the reds are very mellow.
Well, the pirates that are in your area, have you ever kept and bred those?
No, no, I've basically they're here in the yard and I leave them alone, but I've never really wanted to do much for the rattlesnakes because I always felt that the market was kind of risky. You start selling venomous stuff and somebody gets bit. Um, Again, possessions. You think you own possessions, but at a certain point, you're willing to take some chances to make some big bucks, whether it's smuggling or whatever. And once you start owning a house or two, and you have money in the bank, and you realize that you can lose a job and lose all your possessions, then they own you at that point, and you can't take certain risks that might risk that going away. Plus, you're married with a kid and got to kind of take care of them too.
Yeah.
I
Well,
was
I'm a
married
huge.
quite young.
So you still married to the same one?
Nope, got a different one.
Well, I'm
I
sorry to hear
basically
that.
was basically poking fun at my girlfriend in high school, and she took me seriously. And that was I was happily married for 3 years, and out of the 11 we were together, that wasn't too bad. And then I was single for 20 years, and now we've been together about 27 years, and pretty pleased. I think this one will make it to the end. In fact, she wasn't really into reptiles or anything, but once we got married and I kind of made her an offer of, do you want to keep working or do you want to retire and stay home and help me take care of the snakes? She took care of all the babies. She basically,
Oh, wow.
I would help with shed problems and, occasional problems, but sometimes we'd have over 1,000 shoe boxes full of baby snakes, and she'd go down the rows and pick the pinkies out and put in there and feed them and record them. And if there was any question of anything, she'd just pull it out a little bit and ask me about it later. But she pretty much ran the baby room.
It's a big job.
Yeah.
Yeah. In this book, you've got your cage is set up to where you actually had a kind of a drawer system on the underside of it. I don't remember seeing, it's been a while since I've looked that book up, but I don't remember seeing pictures of your baby racks. So you had all these shoe boxes, you had 1,000 of them. Did you build racks for them or did you just
Yeah.
stack them up?
No, we
Okay.
built, although half the time they overflowed and we ended up having to stack the shoe boxes. At that time of year, the room was warm enough that they didn't really need to be on the heat. But we'd sometimes have to stack them and put 2x4 across them to hold them down. But for the most part, I think we had capabilities of 1,040 shoe boxes and I don't know 80 sweater boxes that would hold the growing up ones for the future breeders and also the babies.
So what's your favorite locale of the California king snake? What do you like, the banded or the striped?
Well, I kind of like the black and white stripes that's found near Scissors Crossings down in the Anza-Borrego Desert. To me, they're the prettiest natural one, but you get into some of the lavender and black and white and banana kings and all this other stuff that they have, and some of those are pretty attractive as well. But as far as wild, I would prefer the black and white striped. It just seems very clean.
And what species of the pyros have you owned and bred?
Well, basically, there was only two subspecies that got combined to one. So you're talking pyro and pyro woodeneye. But supposedly they've sunk the woodeneye and consider them all the same now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Actually, I take that back. Nablockeye also. I had the Tarahumara Mountain Kings. I forgot about them.
So did you, were you able to go out and collect those? Because I hear they're very hard to find.
No, I bought all the ones I had.
Mm.
In fact, I've never actually caught a pyro. Now, I remember we used to catch as an odd all the time. And I was always partial to women with large breasts because we would have a push-up bra and then have her wear a kind of a hanging down straight shirt. And we'd have these little nylon bags we'd put the Mountain Kings in and then tuck them up under her bra. So the Rangers were all men and they thought they were seeing everything. They wouldn't suspect anything hanging down. But I had a friend of mine and his wife were out and they had read a book about collecting Arizona Mountain Kings, and you supposedly walk the washes and you do this and that. And I told them what to do. And so my girlfriend and I went out and we come back and they're sitting kind of forlornly around their truck, which I made them drive because the Fish and Game was always looking out for my van. It was very inconspicuous. It had a 4-foot snake with glowing eyes on both sides, and then it had a arrow in the back pointing to the left that said "Ladies' Leg Inspection" ahead. So it was not it was not too hard to pick out. But anyway, they're sitting there kind of dejected looking, and hey, did you find any? Shh. Did you find any? No, we didn't see anything. So we're driving past the point where you usually get stopped, and I snap my fingers, and my girlfriend reaches under her bra and pulls out one. You got one. Pulls out another one. She pulls any more. So we had 3 of them. They didn't see a thing. But
so would you share that secret? How did you find them?
well, they're in the rocks, and basically, the little ones. If you just go to a south-facing slope and you flip rocks, you'll find the little ones under there because they eat the lizards and things. But if you want to find the the yearlings and grown up, you look for the big boulders, which is what they usually hibernate under because they do get snow up there in the lagunas. But if there's a big pile of rocks, of smaller rocks, if you sneak up on them, sometimes you can pick up the top rock and they'll be underneath it, basically what I call reverse sunning. They're against the warm rock, but they're hidden. Or sometimes you can look in the crevices and you'll see them in the crevices of the rocks. But there were certain rock piles that for years, just once a year, I would go and I would move maybe 100 rocks from this rock, maybe 10 feet over to this rock and leave it nice and piled up. And I'd find 2 or 3 in that pile. And then next year I'd find 2 or 3 in this pile. Well, after a few other people decided to go up and hunt, all those rocks are now partly rolled down the hill. And I'm sure there's still the mountain kings up there, but you can't make them come out where they're easier to find.
That's too bad.
Well, I was breeding the Zanata, and then Fish and Game said, well, if you can breed one that we can recognize as not wild caught, I'll let you keep them, but otherwise they're going to get protected at a certain point. So I started breeding for a pattern where I was trying to get the bands broken to where the stripe would kind of go down the back. And I was on about my 3rd generation, and they said, nope, you just got to get rid of them. So I basically traded him to a guy in Texas for a bunch of gray bands and annulata that he had to get rid of because of the Texas laws. And so I'm in California breeding Texas stuff, and he's in Texas breeding California stuff. And we were both happy, I guess.
So you worked with annulata. Did you ever work with multi-strata?
No.
That's my favorite milk because that's where that's where I'm from, and I've actually seen 2 that have come out of the wild, and I have a pair that Dr. Heinrich actually reproduced. I'm trying to get those raised up and breed them, but annulata is still a snake that I want to get out there and find. Have you found? So you said you saw some in Mexico. You caught them.
Yeah, we saw some in Mexico, and we also saw one on the road at what the heck is that? Baker's Crossing there on 385 or whatever that is. It goes north out of Comstock. And then we found the Selenops on Highway 118, and I used to breed those because I bought a bunch of them, locality specific from the Highway 118 area. Did the Trans-Pecos rat snakes, corn snakes, albino black rats, the regular black rats, gopher snakes, bull snakes, pine snakes. I don't know, this list goes on and on. But then I just kind of, other than the gopher snakes that had my name and the Gila monsters and beaded lizards, kind of just focused on the king snakes because they were never the super glamorous, but they were always sellable. They were always attractive. They could all eat mice for their entire life. Although if you have, in fact, with your snakes you're talking about, if you ever have any real trouble getting them to eat or grow, use rat pups, because it seems like they just go voracious for rat pups. You wouldn't think they would, but there seems to be a lot more nutrition in a rat pup than there is the same size mouse, because you get some of these snakes on the rat pups and you'd be surprised how fast they grow. We had Pueblans breeding in 9 months.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Well, that was the male. The female was almost 2 years old, but still it got up big enough to breed.
The fatty rats.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready for the silly question time?
I used to tell people I've never been asked a stupid question, but I was wrong on both occasions. First stupid question. How much are your
All right.
$65 milk snakes? Second stupid question. If I buy the snake from you,
I'd say 165.
yeah, for you, yeah, special. But the second stupid question was, if I buy the snake from you, can you guarantee the parents weren't sterile?
Somebody actually asked you that?
They did. But now there's context with that one, because for a long time we were thinking that the albino speckled kings, trying to breed albino to albino, for some reason you couldn't get anything, and they thought maybe albino males were sterile, and that's what they were getting at. But the way it was phrased was a very stupid question.
That's funny.
So anyway, silly question. Go ahead.
All right. So let's say that Netflix approaches you and they want to make a docudrama of your life. Who would you want to play you in the movie?
Me.
I knew you were going to say that.
That sounds like fun. Then we get to do it all over again.
Oh man. So who? Yeah. So who would be 20-year-old you then?
That's a good question. I don't remember being 20. Seemed like I was always. I started my first full-time job at 14, and basically have always worked. I've never felt like I was a kid.
Wow.
But I don't know. That's a good question. Whoever they thought could do it, I guess. I don't think it would matter.
Interesting.
That wasn't silly.
I thought it was funny.
So what else you got?
Have you ever worked with tarantulas?
Oh,
yeah.
I am not a spider person. No, I had one guy that wanted me to catch him a bunch of the brown tarantulas, whatever they call them out here, and I for some reason decided to do it. And so I was catching them in coffee cans. I had all these coffee cans, but when it came time to ship them, I was going to put them in little butter tubs and ship them. And I dumped the spider out on the ground and put the butter tub over it and then slide the lid under it. And then one time I dumped and it didn't come out. So I looked like this and the thing had spread eagled across the thing and it ran up my arm. And I just said, no more. We're done with them. And salpugets. I had a girlfriend collecting with me once, and she was going to go out and get a gecko, but a salpuget was out there too. She screamed, ran back in the truck, locked the door, rolled up the window. I mean, I said, get that gecko, But no, I'm not a spider person. I think when I grew up, the bedroom that I had was a converted garage, and I don't think they sealed the vents right or something, because on more than one occasion, you know how you're sleeping at night and you feel something, you want to itch it or scratch it. Well, I turned a light on, and more than once a black widow spider was walking on me. So, and we have a lot of them around here. I mean, you can tell when you're in a web because it's like nylon. It's just they're much stronger than the webs of any other spider. In fact, I guess they used to use them in scopes for the sights and scopes until the nylon was invented. But supposedly the black widow web is stronger by weight than steel. So
Wow.
And we have a bunch of them here.
So when you were bringing stuff in from India, you weren't bringing in any of your country. When you were bringing stuff in from Africa or South America, you didn't bring in any invertebrates. It was all just reptiles.
No. Well, once in a while, the guy from Sri Lanka would send me something and say, "Do you have a market for these?" I mean, he sent me some shrimp. I forget what he called them, but they were big shrimp. Well, we ate those. I mean, I couldn't see getting in the tropical fish business. Although at one time we were going over to Arizona and buying axolotls and then bringing them around and selling them as water dogs to the pet shops. And we were making some pretty good money until they started eating all the tropical fish. We didn't think they would eat that. We thought you just drop worms down in there and they'd do it. But man, they were gobbling up some expensive fish when the people, oh yeah, this water dog will be a real nice addition to your aquarium. It'll just feed the, whatever those worms are they feed fish.
Blood worms.
And but I don't know how many hundred we sold before our business was curtailed.
That's funny. Hey, I have a breeding project that I just brought to a head a little bit 3 weeks ago. It was my first daughter that I produced. So
Congratulations.
thank you. And I have to swap my wife so she can take a shower and I can make sure the baby's sleeping here. So I have to hop off. But you guys keep talking. And Bob, I think you need to tell them the story about being in court with the gun and how you got there. And
Yeah, but that's on your video. You don't want to give up your material, do you? We can come up with new stuff.
Either way, but we're all family here, so it doesn't matter. But
well, it's good seeing you again.
Yeah, it's great seeing you too, Bob.
Thanks for referring me over to these folks. They seem like good people.
Oh, they are, and JD's way smarter than me, so
except
he pulls names out of his hat way better than I do.
I mean, Beauty and the Beast I like better than Deadly Spider Woman.
Yeah,
whatever that other term is.
Well, congratulations on the birth of your daughter, Ben. I haven't actually got to officially congratulate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Somehow I did
it. Have a great night.
I know you're an educated man, but have you figured out what caused it?
I'm not sure. I think the parents were sterile, though.
Oh, because for now, I mean, to me, kids are pretty much worthless until they're about 5 years old. And then they experience things with you. They go places with you. You're their hero and you do all kinds of stuff. And then the girl gets to be about 15, 16 and things change again. And suddenly it becomes a liability again. So good luck to you.
Thanks. It is what I'm worried about.
It's coming.
You have a long journey ahead of you, my friend.
Yeah. All right.
And it gets longer when they hit puberty.
I'm sure. Try not to look too
just
far.
Just remember what you did at that age and then panic.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Good night, Ben. Thanks
good seeing you, Ben.
Yep. Good seeing you too, guys. I'll see you guys
later.
Take
care. All right. Bye.
Good night.
So you've lived in California. You said you were born in New Jersey. So what other places have you lived?
Well, basically, I was brought out here as a Navy brat at about 6 months of age and lived nowhere but California, pretty much Southern California ever since. And that was in 1945. So I've been here a while.
And have you ever got to go down and hunt the below California into Mexico? What's the name of that rattlesnake that doesn't have a rattle?
Oh, the Carlos-Inyo, the Carlos-Inyo?
Yeah, have you ever got to see one of those?
I've actually owned several of them, but they were bought from people that brought them up because I've never actually caught one.
Wow. So I bet you that was an experience. So what they say is every time they shed, they actually get a button and it just drops off because they don't have the anchor point.
Correct. Well, basically it's like a pre-button that continually sheds. They just have that one button, and when they shed, it just peels off over it and stays the same.
Wow. Were you ever able to breed those?
No. I just had them in transitory of, hey, I'll buy this from you and sell it to that guy.
So your alligator experience, did you ever get to reproduce those?
No, those were sold, but I ended up having one in my snake pit for a while, and it got to be kind of a liability, and so I ended up selling it to a guy. It was just a novelty. I just wanted one.
Did it get to be pretty friendly with you?
That particular one didn't, but a friend of mine that has Al, he gives talks to different places. He has about a 10-footer, and he brought it out here, and it's perfectly friendly. So I was letting it crawl all over me with about 30 feet of reticulated pythons and sent it into Survivor trying to get on the show, but they never even bothered to call me. Maybe they thought I could survive, and they want people that can't.
So if you had a chance to go on Survivor, you would?
In a minute. Although now I'm old enough that probably I couldn't do the things I used to do as a kid, but I'd still give it a shot.
So would you do Naked and Afraid?
Yeah, I'd be afraid to be naked, though. Things don't work the way they used to.
Oh, man. I don't know if I want the show business life that bad.
Well, I wouldn't want the life. It's just an experience. I mean, if you can go have fun and then walk away from it and go back, I mean, I've met some of the people that were on Survivor at some of the different reptile shows, and like the guy that looked like the pirate Reuben or Rudy or something like that. He and his wife were on it, and they said that, you know, they were on an island, but there was a fence and they couldn't go into the neighbor's property, and they were kind of restricted as to what they could do and where. And they make it sound like you can roam anywhere and do anything you want. But and then some of the places that they've gone, you know, there's endangered species that even though you've got a meal right there, you're not allowed to kill or eat or touch these particular animals. And so it kind of defeats it. But I used to be a pretty good spear fisherman, and if they gave me a Hawaiian sling and a snorkel and goggles, I think I could feed the tribe. I've been bitten by more eels and got attacked by sharks in the middle of the night and a few other odds and ends in my experiences doing that. So it's all fun. I'm glad the shark didn't like the taste of shit.
So tell us about that experience, getting bit by a shark.
I didn't get bit by it. I was out on San Clemente Island, and when the airfield closed, we had extra people on the fire department because we had to be there when it opened the next day, so you couldn't just leave. And so I was the chief out there, so I'd have one of my guys drive my truck down to what they call Knott's Pier, and then we would jump in the water at Wilson Cove Pier and swim along the shallower rocky side, grabbing lobster, and we'd go 4 or 5 miles, and then get out at Wilson, Knott's Pier, and jump in my truck and drive back to the barracks. And one night, this shark, just about 5-6 foot shark, we must have been going through breeding grounds because it was a leopard shark, and they're supposed to be fairly harmless, but this thing's coming right at me, stomach high. So I have a big 10-cell aluminum light, and I smashed down on it. So now it's in my groin, shaking its head, and I'm waiting for my voice to change because I didn't know what was going on down there. But my partner said it just shook its head and swam away. And then another one came and was right about knee high. So I put my feet up and stomped on it. And at this point, we're starting to get kind of nervous. I thought my mask was leaking, but apparently I was sweating because it was getting real. Before you dive down and you swim around looking for lobster, you see them from the top and you go down and get them. Now we were making long dives down to get a lobster and long up. Usually it takes 4 hours to do that swim. We made it in an hour and a half because it was just time to get out of the water, but there's cliffs all alongside. So it wasn't like we could climb out and walk. We just had to either go against the current and try to swim back or go the whole way. But I've been swimming along the rocks at night and had sleeping seals fall off and land on me. But it's all fun. I survived it. So that's the important thing to me.
Wow. So tell us about being on a movie set. So you get there and you got your animals. What's the next step?
What movie set are we talking about?
Like when you were working with a TV set, when you were working with Steve Irwin.
And Joe
he just had his wife and crew out here, and we just wandered around and took pictures of what he wanted to take. And he was going to go over to Arizona and look for Gila monsters, but we weren't sure he'd find any. So we set up a wild looking Gila monster. Basically he was authentic in the sense that whatever we set up, Bob, have you found them this way? Is this the way they really are? And so everything that we did could have been real. It could have been real, although, you just figure, okay, there's 3 of us right now, but let's just say with a sound guy and the camera guy and all these other things, there's 6 of us. What do you suppose the chances are that we're going to just head up that hill and all of these people traipsing around with all this gear find something worth taking a picture of that wouldn't be so prohibitively expensive by all of our time and, what it's going to cost to get us to do that. Now the other guy, the Englishman, I can't remember his name right now, but he used to come here once in a while, but he would pretty much only take pictures of what he found, but he went off the air because it was just, even though he was some of his own money doing it, he basically couldn't sustain the pace, if you want to call it that, by just finding stuff on his own. It's just like what I was telling you with the really valuable snakes. Finding an Arizona mountain king like that or an albino, whatever, is probably a once in a several lifetime experience. And the idea that you just head out and suddenly find one of those things just isn't comprehensible.
Right.
That's my big word for the day, by the way.
I like that word.
Well, we knew from experience, like in that video that you're talking about where Steve Irwin he went over to Arizona with the Jets and all that. He was going down one gully and he's like, oh, look, there's a Western Diamondback. Oh, look, there's a Mojave. Oh, look, there's a speckled rattlesnake. Oh, look, there's
Yeah,
a
he
Gila
needs
monster.
a different line. Yeah, but I mean, occasionally, now he did find he found one of the Pyrus rattlesnakes here locally on his own. And we were teasing him about it because he thought he had a red diamond rattlesnake because they have quite a few different patterns. And one of the ones around here that blend in with the adobe is kind of a reddish look. And he was basically saying, this is the home of the red diamond rattlesnake. Oh, look at this beauty. I mean, he didn't actually call it a red diamond rattlesnake, so he had some wiggle room. But he thought he had a red diamond rattlesnake when he really had a Pyrus, a speckled rattlesnake.
Well, that's cool. The guy was very knowledgeable, but nobody can know everything about all the animals out there.
Right.
No, he basically was just making films and was, in fact, Jeff Lim from the San Diego Zoo kind of got him started because he went over there on kind of an apprenticeship at the place, or actually, I guess he was supposed to go to one of the zoos, and something happened, and so he ended up at the Irwin's place, and he was showing this stuff locally, and what's his name Jeff decided that he should submit it to National Geographic, and it became a hit, and the rest is history.
Guy did a lot for reptiles. I know a lot of people don't respect him because he was a little wild and carefree with his handling, but he brought a lot of respect for. There's a lot of animals that didn't get killed because he did what he did.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing here. That's, I would have killed it until I watched Steve Irwin on TV. So I agree with you. That's exactly right. He did a lot more good than he did bad. Yeah,
it's too bad that he's gone because he was a very passionate man.
Yeah, the way he went was ridiculous.
Yeah,
stingray in the heart. Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, going to India. So you said that you did some importation from there. That's one of my favorite places in the whole world. The king cobra is my second favorite cobra. The spectacle is my favorite snake in the whole world. What kinds of animals were you bringing across from there?
Mostly the rough and smooth-scaled sand boas, the Indian light-faced python. I know there were some others, and there were some lizards too, but I can't remember what they were now. But I think they had some kind of weird water snakes down there that I swear were vindictive. I had some of them that I put in my outside snake pit, and I remember one of those damn things crawled out of the pond, crawled up on the rock that I had a wall, and I'd step out on a rock and then into the pit, and I swear it came out of the water, came up the rock, and bit me in the foot, and then turned around and looked kind of sheepish and dove back in the water. So, and the rat snakes, the Pitaius something or another, the 6-7 foot rat snakes, those are pure evil. They're just evil. They never calm down, and they're just always trying to bite you or shit on you or both. I think they were Pitaius mucosus, Indian rat snake or something like that.
I've heard of them, but I don't know anybody that's ever kept them other than you, I guess.
Well, I can tell you why. You have one experience with them, or you hear one experience about them, and then you don't want them.
So were you ever able to go to India and do some herping over there?
No. I had the one guy that was sending stuff to me come over here, though, and he was a devout Hindu, and I was a little worried about, fixing him vegetarian stuff. But the first thing he wanted to do was go to McDonald's. So I just figured, okay, we'll get along fine. He'll be a Hindu when he goes back. But out here, he's hamburgers and hot dogs and, whatever.
That's amazing. So you didn't bring any crocodilians across, the gharials or anything?
No.
Well, I don't know if you know, but India has some very beautiful tarantulas. Could have made a fortune bringing those in.
Oh, yeah.
Well, back then, I don't know if there was a spider industry. I'm not really sure that anybody was selling spiders back then. I mean, we're talking the 70s and 80s, early 80s, maybe.
Well, I got a friend that in the early 80s, he was bringing them in from England because there was nobody here in the U.S. selling them. So he'd actually pay somebody over in England, and they'd ship it through the post office legally at the time, and he'd get his spiders that way.
Well, more power to you. I mean, here I am a millionaire that's made it selling snakes. I'm sure not going to criticize anybody that's raising worms or spiders or crickets or anything else they want to do. I mean, whatever you do and it works for you and you can make money at it if it's needed. I mean, my snake started out as a hobby, and it started out that, I just wanted what I wanted to keep. And back then, again, it was just a collection. One of this, one of this, one of this. But eventually the breeding came about. And then pretty soon, I was trading for stuff. But pretty soon you got to the point where the guy that had what I wanted didn't want what I had. So I would sell what I had and buy what I wanted. But then it got to the point where I had all I wanted or all that I could take care of. And I like to liken it to a cattle farm. If you've got, let's say 2 people can take care of 50 cattle or cows, milking them and doing all that stuff. But if you get 60 cows, you can't take care of them, and then all 60 of them suffer and you kind of lose your business or it goes bad. Well, there's a certain carrying capacity on anything, including reptiles. And if you exceed it, for instance, if you can handle 200 snakes, well, that's fine. But what happens if those 200 snakes have 400 babies? Now you've got 600 snakes to deal with. And so at a certain point, I couldn't get anything else. And so I was just converting the snakes into cash. But then I used to live in a housing tract and I had some trouble with the neighbors. So I started buying the houses around me so I could evict anybody that gave me any shit. And I ended up with 3 houses around me before I decided to move out here to the country where things are a little more wide open.
Well, so you're a millionaire from snakes.
Mm-hmm.
That I was unaware of.
I mean, depending on how you want to look at it, but yes, I have well over $1 million, and the most I ever made as a fire chief was $56,000, and so you figure it out.
Wow. So, at what point did you? I assume that you experienced that you have too many milk cows and you can't take care of them at all. At what point did that happen for you? I mean, how many animals did you have? And
I'm not sure how many, but that exact same thing happened because I ended up with my job. I ended up having to be a week on and a week off instead of every other day on the island. I would go out for 6 days and then I'd be home for, basically 7 days and 8 nights. And it got to where I couldn't do it every other week. And so I got rid of the corn snakes, the yellow rats, the black rats, the prairie king snakes, the speckled king snakes, the Mexican black kings. I basically just got rid of a whole bunch of stuff so that the people that would look in on it when I was gone could handle whatever it was, and there wasn't so many that it was overwhelming.
wow. And what would you think was your leanest year as far as how much it cost you to feed your collection and how much money you made that year?
That would be hard to total because hypothetically you didn't always write down cash sales. I mean, you never know. It's one of those things that sometimes there just seems to be a pile of money in your pocket and you can't recall where it came from.
I see. So did you breed your own rodents or were you buying them?
No, I have male mice that did that for me.
So you were keeping your own rodents?
Yes. In fact, the rodents actually paid for everything because, if you need 50 pinkies a week or 500 pinkies a week and so many whiteys and so many fuzzies, you can't just breed those. You end up with not enough one time and too many the next time. Right. And so basically I had a 40-foot insulated trailer that I put 120 mouse cage trays in and 16 rat cubs, and basically was commercially raising the mice and selling the surplus to dealers, or then I had larger collection people coming out and buying mice and rats too. But they basically made a profit to where we paid, when I used to have a utility bill, we paid the utility bills and all of the expenses involved with the snakes, and put money in our pockets. And then anything we made on the snakes was just free.
Wow. And how long did you keep your your rodents going? Because we typically do a feast or famine. We get a bunch going and we're doing okay for a while, and then our colonies just crash on us.
Well, we had if you can imagine, 8 columns of 15 cages each, and we would start the new ones to the left, and they would gradually, as we're cleaning cages, the older ones would be down to the right. And maybe we clean once a month because we had these aspen pellets that dried up the stuff, and we didn't have to clean very often to cut the smell down. And maybe every month or two, we would wipe out the colonies in row 8. And then as we're cleaning, everything gets shifted down, and then we start 15 more colonies in row 1, or maybe sometimes we drop off in the winter, although the commercial people wanted to buy our surplus in the winter, even though we were only feeding a few babies to keep them, growing for future breeders. And so a lot of times we'd keep all 120 going, but sometime in the winter, we would maybe drop down to 8 columns. I mean, not 8, 80 or so, maybe 2/3 of what we normally have. And then when it got to be close to March, April, maybe 8 weeks before that, we'd set up a whole bunch of new colonies. But then anything that cannibalized or was a problem, we'd hang a nail in the wire on that cage. And if there was a problem again, then no matter where it was in the group, it got eliminated. It just was eliminated, so that we always had the young ones moving from left to right, and we always had the adult older ones to feed off to people or sell them to people that needed bigger mice for their food. And then the rats was the same way with the 16 tubs on the bottom. And we just moved them along. We had them on automatic waters, and we had the feed troughs in the front, so you could just walk along with a scoop and fill the troughs. And usually we had 6 females and a male of the mice, and 3 to 4 rat females and a male to the rats, and never really ran out of food of mice and rats.
And what were you feeding the rodents?
It was what they used to call F6 lab blocks. Sometimes we'd go up to F10, but the mice seemed to need a little more fat. And at one time we were feeding Friend Roy dog food because it basically was cheaper, and it still had the same fat and contents that the special mouse blocks were, but they were softer, so the mice had a tendency to chew them up a little bit faster. So you gained in one respect of cost, and you lost in how often you had to keep filling it.
And were these commercial cages or stuff that you had built?
We built.
Wow. So did you?
They're plastic kitty litter trays because they're smooth. They don't have any initials carved in them or anything where the rats and mice can get their teeth on it. The rat tubs were actually the cement mixing, those black plastic things that you mix concrete or things in. Right. But then we had 1/4 by 1/2 welded wire for the top because they could bite through to eat the food through that. If you got any bigger, the young mice would go up through it. The rats, of course, you could have put 1/2-inch wire there and it would have been okay. But and it just basically you could slide the thing out and then tilt it a little bit, and it would go under the water thing. So, and the water thing was one big system that was hooked through a filter and then a pressure regulator, and then just fed through PVC lines going up and down. So you never had to do anything there as long as your house water was on. But it was also set up to where if things went bad, I could take a 5-gallon bucket with a spigot on it and fill it and put it up high, and then run it through gravity feed through the whole lines. And then we had those little sipper tube things that were hanging down so that they couldn't stuff food up in it and make it leak and fill the tubs. You had to adjust it to where you push on the little swivel thing and it would drip, drip, drip. If it went any faster than that, you tighten it up a little bit so you didn't get any leakers.
That's amazing. So did you ever use a commercial tub, or was all your snake cages?
Years ago, before I built this thing that I just described to you, I had some of the regular tubs with the stainless steel thing with a little trough in it and the little flap to where the water bottle went on one side. And that's a pain in the ass to go through and have to fill water bottles all the time. Plus, you had to keep them full because up here, we don't have the hottest or the coldest temperatures in San Diego County, but we have the tallest thermometer. It can be freezing at night and 100 degrees the next day. And so when you've got mice in a room that the temperature is fluctuating a lot, once you get air in the water bottle and it gets cold, it sucks air in, and then when it warms up, it pressurizes and forces the water back out and ends up flooding your tanks. So they were a pain in the neck.
Sounds like a lot of work, but it sounds like you were able to work out most of the wrinkles in your whole on all your projects.
It took time, but yeah, we figured it out.
And
Cool.
what if you had to keep, if you were able to get one type of snake right now that you're completely out of it, what do you think you'd want to keep?
I don't know. I mean, when we got rid of the animals, all of a sudden we have a lot of free time. I play softball 3 days a week now. I work out twice a week for 3 to 4 hours. We go for walks. I don't really think, well, now we've got chickens, and I've got a war with some coyotes and bobcats. I've killed several of them recently, and there's still one that's terrorizing our chickens. But where we live right now, we have a 15-acre chunk of property, and I have one screen off of my bedroom window, and depending on what walks by, it's either a 30-06, a 12-gauge shotgun, or a 22 semi-automatic that comes into play and tries to thin out the predators. I used to like to have this as sort of a nature reserve until the chickens. And happy wife, happy life. When chickens get eaten by things, no happy wife, no happy life. So we're killing the predators.
Yeah, we got the same deal here. She raised up a dozen chicks that she hatched out herself, and we're down to one now. So
They were doing great, and then in 2 nights they all got wiped out except for one little chick. I'm very sad about that. Although all my adult flock is doing well.
So what wiped them out?
We don't really know. We have a big dog and little dogs that are pretty good about listening for stuff, but something was sneaking around. Oh, whatever it was, dug into our hay barn and was taking them in there and killing them. But it had to have been something big to take that many animals in one night. There is just a domestic cat from somewhere that the little dogs chase off, that he was coming and looking at the chicks, but it must have been a bobcat or something bigger that
no clue what it was.
we really don't know.
You might want to get one of those game cameras and set it up aiming at an area where you're pretty sure things are going by, and you'd be surprised what sneaks around at night.
Oh,
I've got one outside the window close to where I shoot, and I actually have a couple dead animals that I put in the trap, and then another one close to the front with some other traps out front, so that if, like a coyote, I've got one that keeps sneaking up to the cage, and he's always looking in, but he just won't go in to take anything. And so I'm trying to put traps under his feet to where if he gets that close, he's going to get caught. But so far I've caught a few of them, but I haven't caught this one.
Well, we know that there's what was that?
I say it's a battle. I mean,
yeah.
We've got mountain lions, we've got bobcats, we've got weasels, skunks, raccoons, possums. I mean, we got all that stuff here, so you never know.
There's a lot of foxes in our area.
Yeah, we've got them too. Yeah.
And we know that the neighbors hounded constantly by raccoons, so I'm guessing it's a colony of them that are sneaking in, but I don't know for sure.
It could be.
Well,
But
take a tine rake, and if you've got a dirt area around it, just rake the hell out of it to where it's smooth, and then go out the next day and look for tracks. It'll kind of tell you what's coming around.
Oh yeah, I guess we could do that. But that's just the life of living in the country. I mean,
I hear you. And I love it.
We do too.
We really do.
Yeah, we actually have our monitors and our crocodiles and our now our water monitors out here. We keep them outside about 9 months out of the year, so we're pretty fortunate.
Quite a few turtles and the Nile monitors, and we have some livestock, some tortoises out there.
So what are you actually breeding?
Anything we can, but not everything is successful every year. This year we produced about 60 retics, and we've got splendidas, eggs, albinos in the incubator, corn snakes, bearded dragons. None of our ball pythons dropped, but it's still early in the season. They might still.
Our beadeds might.
Yeah, I don't think that they got heavy enough. We got to feed them heavier. Our Gilas for the second year in a row didn't go, which the very first time we had Gilas, we incubated the eggs, and about 10 days before they were due to hatch, our incubator failed and cooked everything.
Oh, wow. So there was
So
development in them. You open
Yep.
them up, see then you did everything right. It's just a matter of the incubation. But they take a
Yeah,
long
that
time.
was-
I mean, they take something like 3-4 months, if I remember correctly. Now the beaded lizards, I don't think take as long. I'd have to look at my records, but the Gila monsters, a long time incubation.
Well, that method that you're talking about, I find that interesting with almost dry vermiculite. The way that we were doing it was the way that Dr. Seward recommended, with filter floss and putting them on top of that so that moisture won't touch them. And it worked okay, but we have had eggs go bad too. So we need a better method.
Well, sometimes you just have a bad egg. I mean, sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Right. Especially when they start molding. I mean, a lot of people, gee, you clean the eggs with this to get the mold stuff off. Well, good eggs normally don't mold. And if it's dead or dying, you can scrub away the mold till your fingers are blue, and they're still going to be dead eggs.
Well, we certainly that's one of our life goal animals to reproduce. It took us 10 years to get retic eggs, and we got 2 clutches in 1 year. So hopefully we'll be able to replicate it.
Out of 100.
Thank you. Yeah.
Retics, 2 of my females reproduced. Thank you.
Yes.
And they were pretty too.
Yep. Beautiful babies.
Oh, retics are gorgeous. I remember when Ray Folsom brought the first ones in back in the 60s. He went over to Thailand and brought a bunch of them back, and everybody was buying those things. They were gorgeous with the iridescent skin on them and everything. Gorgeous animals. Unfortunately, most of them weren't friendly. I've imported several hundred of them and could probably count on one hand the ones that were tame. Although I had a guy that had a reticulated python about 12 feet, and he brought it over once and said, it's tame and it'll come to me. And I took him out in the front yard, and I had him go down to the other end of the yard, and I'll be damned if that snake didn't crawl over to him. I thought, well, it was probably just going to go in that direction because there was bushes over there. So I made him go to a different spot, and I took the snake to a different spot, and it came to him again. He did it 2 or 3 times to where I was convinced that snake would go to him. And I had never quite seen a snake do that before. Now indigo snakes are fairly intelligent. I mean, I had a friend that would put a dead rat in his pocket and sit in a chair, and the indigo would crawl up the chair and go into his pocket and grab the rat and eat it. So, I mean, they're capable of being trained, but still, I was impressed with that big retic doing that. Well, wasn't that big?
Well, I've heard stories about white throat monitors that would come to their name, but never actually witnessed it.
Well, a friend of mine that used to have Nile Sewer had a Nile monitor that would ride around with him in the truck, and he could let it out, and it would go off in the field and come back to the truck and everything. So I think you're right. That's entirely possible. They have an intelligence, or they can be conditionally trained somehow.
Wow.
Our Niles don't love us at all.
No, they don't.
This one was the exception. I imported quite a few Nile
slashers.
monitors, and most of them weren't friendly.
Most of the scars that I have are from some kind of monitor. Just moving them and handling them, just their nails and stuff.
Oh, just the claws. I mean, my big beaded lizard, Fernando, he was perfectly tame. I'd take him to all kinds of lectures and everything else, but just picking him up, the claws would get onto you and they'd penetrate the skin real easy. And sometime when I was going to take him someplace, I'd actually give him a nail trim.
Yeah. Our Horridum, we do trim their nails because they don't get a lot of exercise. Most of our monitors are in bigger enclosures that, they have stuff to climb on and they're outdoors part of the year. Our Horridum just kind of lay around. So we do trim all their nails.
Yeah, we've got one Horridum that it sleeps on its back, Every time you go in there, you just about have a heart attack because you
Oh,
think it's dead. You just
you wait,
asleep.
you wait till one shits and then lays on its back, and the nose is close to the shit, and you think it barfed and died. I've had that with both Gilas and Betas. That's a very bad feeling.
So you've observed that behavior, huh?
I have. And the same results of what you were talking about, same reaction.
Yeah, we've got one that we got as adult from Crutchfield in about 2004, and he's still kicking around, still breeding. How long? Your Beateds and your Gilas, how old were they before you
Well,
discontinued breeding?
I just sold the colony, but I kept Fernando and ended up selling him to Chad Brown. And
Oh.
he was a young adult in 1968. And as far as I know, he's still going strong.
Holy cow.
Now,
Yeah,
some of the ones I hatched in the late 60s were still going when I sold, because most of them went to China. I sold them 5-6 years ago. This Chinese guy shows up with a paper bag with $23,000 in 20s. That was a fun day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Chad Brown, we owned his Cuming Eye water monitor from Pro Exotics for many years. He got kind of overfed and kind of died of a fatty liver, but he was happy.
He was the best garbage disposal.
Yeah. Anything else didn't eat went to him, and he ate it every time.
Oh yeah, the Gilas and Betas were that for us. We had, I don't know, 20 some odd Gilas and probably 15 or so Beateds in various growth stages. We were growing some up and, selling most of them. One time, one of the Betas laid 23 eggs, which I think we hatched 20 of them. And back then they were going for 1,000 each, so we put in a nice swimming pool and called it our beaded lizard pool.
Wow, that's amazing. So, have you ever?
Most eggs I ever got was 8.
Wow.
So
have you ever observed either one of those animals in the wild?
Gilas, well, hypothetically, Arizona is a nearby state, and occasionally we used to run through there on our way to Texas, and once in a while we might have a hitchhiker come along with us. Either way.
Well, did you ever work with any of the rare beateds? I can't think of what the
Alvarezii?
Yeah.
Oh, I actually, when I bought Fernando and the starter ones back in the early 70s, there was one female Alvarezii in the group, but for some reason she only lasted a couple of years and died on me.
Wow. That's a beautiful animal that I hope to work with someday. Did you ever work with
They're smaller. I wonder if she was already old, maybe.
It's possible. It's entirely because they basically were wild caught. And this Tom Moisey up at whatever that college is where they transplanted the baboon's heart into a little girl or something, Loma Linda or something like that. Oh. He had them down in the basement, and at one time he decided, I'm just going to sell them all, but if you reproduce any, I want to be able to buy them at what I sold them to you for. And so I ended up selling him a couple back so he could raise up some babies that were offspring from his. Fernando was his favorite. He named it, and it was the only one that ever had a name.
Yeah, ours is named Hannibal.
That's why he was hospitalized.
Huh? Oh, really? Mm-hmm. She got in a bad car wreck when she was about 12 years old. She lost her mother in it, and I guess, how long were you in that hospital?
About a month.
Wow.
We got into a wreck between Barstow and Bakersfield.
That's a stretch of 15 there.
Yeah. And so half of us got flown to Loma Linda and the other half to Palm Springs. Spent a lot of time there as a kid.
Yeah. Well, sorry to have your loss there.
Thank you.
But California is a crazy place. How come you stayed there? How come you didn't move someplace more exciting?
Well, because basically I've lived here all my life, and basically it's very expensive. So the solution is to make more money.
It's a good plan.
It is. I know people that can get me just about anything I need. And if I moved in a completely different place, I would not be happy. I just wouldn't know people. I wouldn't know where to go to get certain things fixed or to buy certain things. And while I like to travel, usually at about the 2-week point, I'm ready to come home because I've got an oasis around me here of 15 acres, and I can shoot guns out the back window. And I've got a bar in the house and a swimming pool in the backyard. And we drive a Lexus and a Toyota, and pretty comfortable. Money in the bank.
So do you ever herp anymore?
I like to walk around the property, and we drag the property. I have some dirt roads set up and some pieces of tin and old boards and everything. And in the spring, I'll let people come out here and look. I don't let anybody take anything, but I herp on the property. It's one of my dreams was to be able to have my own reptile collecting area that nobody else could hunt in and destroy.
It's my dream to own a hill here in West Texas so that I can put boards on it and catch Alterna on it. Well, so what animals do you find on your property?
Well, there's about 15 different species of snakes, about 10 to 12 species of lizards, 2 salamanders. We've got the legless lizard, horned lizards, tiger whiptails. We've got the Cope's leopard lizard, several different skinks. As far as the snakes go, we got the long-nosed snake, not the shovel-nose, patch-nosed snake, red racer, Baja whip snake, striped racer, gopher snake, rosy boa, 3 different species of rattlesnakes, spotted knife snake, lyre snake, blind snake, ringneck snake, garter snake. I don't know if I've mentioned them all, but the glossy snake. There's probably more, but I can't think of who they are.
Wow. She's observed desert king snake going through our yard about a week ago, so I was pretty happy to see that. We're from Roswell. We spent about 15 years. Well, I spent 15 years there, and in our property, all we ever saw was hognose, and I think that's about the only snake we ever caught on our property there.
Right.
So. But
Texas is a good place to be if you're a herper, although I kind of like our weather better.
Well, I'm not a humid guy. I like it dry. I'm a desert rat. So
that's pretty much where we are.
Oh, really? You don't have bad humidity?
No, we're in the mountains east of San Diego, and it's pretty much a high desert. Now we've got the big oak trees, the California oaks, the 4-foot diameter bases. We got several of those on the property, and we have our own wells, and basically pretty dry most of the time. We get maybe a couple of the snow once or twice a year. We're a little less than 3,000 feet, but we're in basically a valley between the mountains that separate the coast and the desert.
Well, it seems like snow follows me. I spent 9 years in North Dakota. I'm from Montana. A couple years before we moved out of Roswell, we got 22 inches of snow, and then our first winter here, we hit. What was the name of that storm?
I don't even know what they called it. People were calling it snowvid, but it was when Texas had the blackouts in 21 and all the crazy. I don't know if it was a blizzard, but it was nasty here. No power.
I mean, back when I was in Florida during some of the herp things, we'd be sitting at the bar with the tornadoes coming in, and you had to stay away from the windows, and they usually had a hurricane. I mean, and they'd have hurricane drinks on sale, so we'd be drinking those, and we'd be, well, you're from California, you got those earthquakes and everything. We couldn't stand that. I said, okay, we're looking out the window here, and we're seeing rocks flying off of roofs and windows breaking and street lights smashing into the ground and everything. And there's not a damn thing you could do about it. If we were sitting in a bar in California, we'd go, what was that? Oh, it was an earthquake. Okay. And everything is fine. I mean, the worst earthquake I've been in maybe rattled us for 30 seconds. And then it's over.
So did you used to go hit the Orlando show when it was the biggest show back in the 90s?
Yes. I used to go down there once in a while, but to be honest with you, it got too expensive. In fact, I stayed at Hank's house the first time I went there, but I've been selling these snakes for many years, and I can't pay the expenses of flying across country and paying hotels and everything, and then go into a room where there's 20 people that sell snakes that they got from me that are just as nice as mine. So it just didn't make sense. So I just decided I'll
Well,
stay on the West
what
Coast.
I'm asking is I was at the '96 Orlando show. I was wondering if you were there.
I couldn't tell you. The one show I went to, Hank Mold had a Venom show across the street, and I think I might have came one other time after that, but I don't remember what year it was. Well, one of the years they actually used my shirt, my pyro, as their shirt logo for that year. So I know I was there during that year.
Well, the thing that I remember about that show was there was a guy there that had albino Nelson's milk snakes. He had adults there and was taking deposits down for babies, and all these people he was asking thousands for them, I believe, and nobody had known it, but the guy had been breeding them for years and had a whole bunch of adults. So when he debuted them, he took everybody's money, and everybody figured they were going to have this rare snake the next year, and he produced a ton of them and made all that money and pissed everybody off.
That sounds like the story about the Microphilus, the triangulin Microphilus, because those guys in Texas did that to
really
a huge milk snake that doesn't need the heat and can live in room temperature and all that stuff. I'm really glad I passed on that deal. I was offered some of them, but I mean, I don't remember that going with the Nelson eye, but I do remember that one guy, they used to be 1,000 at one point, and one guy was selling them at 600 at the show, but he sold about 40 males. He didn't have any females, but all of a sudden the price was now $600 because they were on sale over there for $600, even though, it was just, he was dumping off males because I don't know if he incubated too warm or cool or what happened, but he just produced all males that year.
I hadn't heard that story. What years was that going on?
Shit, I don't know. I mean, I'm lucky to know what year it is now, let alone what I did back then.
Well, do you remember a guy he was on the East Coast and he was really big into multistrata. And he just, the reason I'm asking about him is he was big, producing all these milk snakes. And then he just disappeared. He just got off the market. What was his name? I shouldn't have started that unless I knew his name.
It doesn't ring any bells because most of the guys who were doing the Microphilus or Andesiana, they seem to go back and forth as to what they were calling them. Were in Texas that I knew of.
See, I don't think I've ever seen that snake on a table. Not that I've been doing it that long, but it doesn't ring any bells. I wonder what happened to all those snakes.
Well, a lot of these people were keepers at the Dallas Zoo or the Fort Worth Zoo mainly, and sometimes the Houston, because they used to have a deal, because this was before breeding was taken off. They used to have a deal where if you could breed anything, you got a certain part of it as your private stock. And that's how the Campbell I got out with the Python people, Tracy and Dave Barker. He was a keeper at the zoo, and he got some of the first Pueblans out in the market because he was able to get them out of the zoo because he bred them in his line in the zoo as an employee.
Oh, well, I know my first gauge eye came that way too. They were out of the San Antonio Zoo, which my understanding is those were the prettiest ones because they were solid black, didn't have any white on them. I really love those snakes.
I was always concerned that of the 25 milk snakes, 24 of them, if they have a lot of black on them, you can't sell them because they're ugly. And yet here's one that's all black that's really expensive. So I never got any of them.
Oh, I love that snake. It was they were so shiny, I guess.
Yeah, they are. They're beautiful snakes. But a poor man's indigo, the good Mexican black king. I had one of them over 5 foot long would lay 20 eggs a year for many years. And she was a gorgeous snake, basically, fairly cheap, but still, she was a gorgeous, shiny black snake and not nearly as messy as indigo snakes. Those things are the most god-awful, messy snakes I've ever had.
I hope to have some Eastern someday. Yeah. They changed the laws now to where we can actually catch either 1 or 2 Texas indigos legally. So we may go down and try to hunt those, but the hospital has me on call so much I don't get to go very far very often. So
Well, I would, and unless you're really ready to start cleaning, I would avoid those Florida indigo snakes because they back up to the most remote corner, and then it's like a grease gun stuffed with the most god awful fish guts and anything else you can think of to throw in there. And they'll squirt it halfway up the wall, and it'll run down to any crack between the window and the front or whatever. It's just, God, they're messy. I mean, it's out of 100 snake cages, if 2 of them are indigo snakes, you'll spend 30 to 40% of your time cleaning in those 2 cages.
Wow.
So I take it you've kept them. Have you ever bred them?
No. It seemed like every time I tried to breed them, one of them would eat the other one.
Oh, wow.
But they're kind of off season, in the wild. They breed in the winter, and they didn't really fit the, when I start. Well, back then was when I was a collection rather than breeding anyway. But, I didn't have any since I became a breeder.
Oh, Walt Deptula. That was the name of the big milk snake guy on the East Coast. Does that ring any bells with you?
As a matter of fact, I believe I've sold him snakes. I probably have him in my file card thing over here.
Well, I've tried to email the guy. He actually ended up with one of the multi-strata that I collected in Montana. I didn't collect it, but I ended up with the snake. And I've been trying to contact him because I'd love to interview him because he was doing some pretty amazing stuff with some of the coastal milks and things like that. But he just dropped off the face of the planet. So, yeah, we're always looking for people like you. You guys are hard to find. It's hard to find someone that knows you or is willing to give out your phone number.
When was I hard to find? She called me and said, "Hey, I want to interview you."
Yeah, and you know how long it took to get to that point? A year.
Well, what's taking you so long? I've been here the whole time.
We had to beg, borrow, and steal.
Well, what did you steal? Maybe I want some of it.
It was a snake, I can guarantee you.
Oh, okay. Don't want to get back into that. I've had my time with it.
Well, it was a pleasure.
I just enjoy seeing what everybody else is doing now. And it's like in the old days when I used to collect. Now I can go up in the mountains and see a beautiful mountain king and walk away and leave it there, and it doesn't bother me. But in the past, no way in hell. It's coming home with me.
Well, we're like kids in a candy store right now, too, just because, I spent years trying to get Pictogaster, the Transpecos copperheads.
They're beautiful. I had some of those.
Well, last year she slayed them.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they're my favorite. I really like that copperhead.
Well, it seems like everything's your favorite.
Yeah.
Mine is very most favorite.
Yes,
but he
she
doesn't
is.
always admit that.
Well, I would hope so.
I'm a bit of an addict, I have to admit.
Well, you'll get over it after a few years of cleaning snake cages.
What, it's been 30 years already?
I guess not long enough.
That's still a few.
No, I love it. I really enjoy, and the hobby is, we've got some good people that have helped us along the way, and it's wonderful
The first advice from the old man to the young man is never say hobby. It's a business, because everything that you do in your business is a deduction. If it's a hobby, IRS disavows or disallows the deduction. So never use the word hobby. You are in a business.
I will remember that. It has changed from forever on. It's our business.
All right, there we go.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We've kept you on for quite a while, and I loved every minute of it. Is there anything that you'd like to say to all the youngsters out there that are wanting to get in and do what you did?
Just carry the torch, enjoy it as much as you can, because there's nothing glamorous about shoveling snake shit, but it's a lot of good people that you meet. Now, there are some bad ones out there. You got to watch for them, but most of them are genuine, decent, good people, and you can make a lot of friends and meet a lot of very interesting people in this business.
Wise words.
Yes, they are. Well, everybody, thank you for stopping by tonight. If you care to, please like, share, and subscribe. And we will be signing off with Mr. Applegate. It's been wonderful finally getting to meet you after all these years. I've heard about you for over 20 years now, and I'm glad I got to actually sit down and talk to you with you for a little bit.
Well, one of these days we'll have to go through the really exciting stories, but yeah, it's been fun too.
Well, let's set the date.
No, let's just think about it a while. Just anticipation.
All right,
All
everybody.
have a wonderful evening.
Take
Thank you
care.
so much.
You
Thanks,
too.
everyone.
Pleasure talking to both of you.